Hello everybody, thank you for joining us for what is the first European International Cyclocross event of the 2019-2020 season. I'll be bringing you commentary and alongside me, the expert in cyclocross, Mr Tom Last, who I know a lot of you have been missing. Feels quite early to start cyclocross last year, doesn't it, at the start of September, and we're not going to have particularly cyclocross conditions today in Eeklo.
No, not particularly. It does feel early, but 8th of September, there've been a couple of races over in China already. The US season opener happened yesterday in Rochester where two Belgian riders won the men's race ahead of Stephen Hyde. So it's early. If you're on really good form now, it's a long wait to the Worlds
Yeah.
in the end of January, but got to get the points, got to get started.
Yes, got to get started somewhere, and they're starting today with what is now called the Ethias Cross, which is part of an 8-race series, which last year was known as the Brico Cross. So if you're confused, it's just a change in the sponsor for this season. Start of a big season, in fact, for cyclocross here on GCN Racing. We're also going to have the Super Prestige and DVV series for you, and shortly in the next few rounds we'll be having the experts that are Marty McDonald and also Jeremy Powers, who's currently over in Canada filming some very exciting stuff for us at GCN. So I'm afraid for today you are stuck with the two of us, but we're going to do our very best to talk you through the women's elite and under 23 event and the men's event, which comes later on this afternoon. So first up in the women's, we don't have Sana Kant here lastly, but we do have Ellen Van Looy, 38-year-old from Telenet Fidea. She's at the top of the start sheet today. We've also got Los Cels. One rider who I am particularly looking forward to watching today is Shirin Van Anrooy. Just looking her up earlier, she is the current junior European individual time trial champion, which she won just a month or so ago, and she's the national champion in that discipline too. But she is a multifaceted rider that I think could do well today.
Yeah, I've been reading your notes, and it says she's also a runner, a triathlete, and a duathlete.
Yeah, but
So
she's been right up there in international triathlon. She's a jack of all trades and a master of them all as well, from what I've been reading so far. So I think she
wouldn't know
could
what
do
to do
very
with
well.
that sort of athletic talent,
No,
personally.
no.
Uh,
So we're looking out to see how she does today. We've also got Maud Captains riding for the Power Salzon Bingo team, under 23 champion back in 2015 in the Europeans after Femke van der Driesche was subsequently banned for the use of a motor within her bike. We've also got her teammate Laura Verdonschot, the 23-year-old Belgian, riding for that very same team, who's a multiple-time under 23 national champion. So it should prove to be a very competitive first outing. The course today last year is in Eeklo. It's been a couple of years since they last used it, and it's changed reasonably significantly since 2 years ago.
yeah, I've heard it's got some pretty nasty climbs in potentially this time round. It's dry as well, although looking at some footage from the course earlier, it did look like it wasn't completely dry. It looked like it could be slightly tacky, but I think, September racing, you expect it to be dry, you expect it to be fast, and it should be both of those.
Yeah, they've put some sand sections in as well. It's been quite interesting actually following them on social media, the organisers of this race, watching them build the course over the last couple of weeks. And incidentally, if you're looking to make your own cyclocross course, should I say, we had a great video from Jeremy Powers on doing exactly that just a couple of weeks ago. And incidentally, in the half-time interval between the women's elite and the men's elite races, you will be able to watch a couple of videos that Jeremy has been producing for us recently on this very subject of cyclocross. So stay tuned for them. The race is going to kick off in exactly 7 minutes from now. So before we get there, lastly, we should also discuss who's going to be here on the men's start sheet in an hour or so's time. Again, we are missing the two big name riders from cyclocross, they being Wout van Aert and Mathieu van der Poel. The latter still doing his road season after a very successful cyclocross and mountain bike season. He's currently competing at the Tour of Britain, so we're unlikely to see him for some time.
Yeah, we are, and I think I saw in the news the other day he has come out and said, "I know I'm a favourite for the World Championships," which
On the road, yeah.
yeah seems pretty obvious. Is he a favourite for everything he starts?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
There aren't many races that he starts where you don't think he's got a chance of winning.
So yeah, no Mathieu van der Poel, no Wout van Aert. We do have Toon Aerts, arguably the third strongest rider last season. I'm not sure that anyone particularly wants that title, but I think behind Mathieu van der Poel and Wout van Aert, who are freakishly talented, like you put them in any generation of races, I imagine they would be winning, right?
Yeah.
I think maybe Toon Aerts will take that. He is current Belgian champion, where he beat Wout van Aert. He's also got there's also Laurens Sweeck in the race.
Yeah.
Lawrence's brother Dieter Sweeck is racing in the USA at the moment, so only one Sweeck in this race. Michael van Turenhout, always a threat. You've also got Elliot Isabet, two-time world under 23 champion. Could be an interesting race.
And Tom Maersen, who you beat, you were just showing me, in the junior European Cyclocross Championship many moons ago.
A decade and a half ago, man.
Yeah, he's got it bookmarked on his computer, which is exactly what I would do as well. Thank you also for all getting involved in the comments section here on YouTube. I think Lars is going to be keeping his eye on the Facebook comments as well. We're very pleased to have your company for this, the first international cyclocross of the season. Wout van Aert, meanwhile, of course, still out through injury after that horrific crash in the individual time trial at the Tour de France in Pau just a couple of months ago. Seems like it's taking him a little bit longer to get back on the bike than he was hoping for. So again, it could be quite some time before we see him on our screens racing cyclocross.
Yeah, it sounds like he had a number of setbacks, and I wonder if even we are going to see him this cyclocross season. It sounded like it was a really nasty crash, but it was one of those weirdly nasty injuries that kind of got worse the more he learnt about it by the sounds of it. Was it a torn or separated muscle?
And apparently the initial operation which he had in hospital in France wasn't done very well, so he had to go under into the operating theatre again once he returned home to sort all of that out. But let's hope he gets back to his best fairly soon. I'm sure he'll be very much concentrating on next year's road season, but I do hope we see him in cyclocross again this winter. That said, even without those two, given what they've done on the road this year, it does give you kind of a new respect for the riders who were just behind them the last year or two in the world of cyclocross, because when you see how phenomenally talented they are and how they've even shown up some of the best road riders in the world this year, it makes you realise just how hard they must be to beat in an hour-long cyclocross race.
Yeah, and Wout van Aert's Belgian time trial champion this year as well.
Yes, he is.
And then Tim Merlier. Tim Merlier is predominantly a cyclocross rider, not... if he was starting this race, we would certainly be discussing him, but we would not expect much more than that 3rd to 7th or 8th space any given cyclocross race from him. He won the Belgian Road Nationals and a bunch of other road races, so this is not just two riders who are phenomenally talented. This is a bunch of riders who are in fact really good at whatever they turn their hand to. Again, another name on the list, Dan Suter, was raced one mountain bike World Cup this year in Val de Sol, so started right at the back of the grid, worked his way up to top 30, which when you think you're picking your way past 10 or so riders a lap on single track is, and still at the same time only losing around 20 or 30 seconds a lap to the eventual winner. That's kind of hugely impressive.
Not too shabby, is it? And Toon Aerts, the Belgian national cyclocross champion, who also won the World Cup last year, who last year was just talking about. He finished 4th at the Baloise Belgian Tour earlier on this year, in June, I think that was. The winner of that event was Remco Evenepoel, who probably doesn't need any introduction. Second was Victor Campenaerts, the world hour record holder currently. And third was Tim Wellens, who's got an amazing pedigree. So that, again, just goes to show how competitive these guys and girls are when they go over to the road. Back to the women's race, also absent of some of the bigger names in this, the likes of Sanne Cant, who we've already mentioned, but also Marianne Vos, who's still looking to build towards the World Road Race Championships in Yorkshire in a couple of weeks' time, and also Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, who's made a great comeback recently by winning the World Mountain Bike Championships.
Yeah, that was phenomenal, that race. She just she didn't have the fastest start, but kind of worked her way through the field and went from there.
Right, let's concentrate now on the race in hand there. You just saw a brief shot there of a rider who is making her return, Jolien Verschuren, to racing. We'll talk more about her a little bit later on. Kim van der Stene also making a return after citing fatigue late last year. She hasn't raced since December. But to go through the full start list, you just saw on the left-hand side there, Ellen Van Looy of the Telenet Fidea team. The CCC rider is my tip for the win today, 20-year-old Inge van der Heijden. Apologies if I've mispronounced that, but she is the current under-23 world champion. She was 65th actually very recently at the Grand Prix Plouay, the Women's World Cup race in France just a week or so ago. Sophie de Boer is number 6 there, riding for the Park Hotel Brepark.nl team. And that is number 12, Manon Bakker, who I also did some research on earlier, 20-year-old junior national champion in this discipline back in 2017. They are now getting ready for the off, so you can see the UCI commissaire there on the left-hand side. Always nervous times, isn't it, in a mountain bike or cyclocross race, because the start is so very important.
Certainly, and again, this is the start of the season for everyone, so I'm sure they want to be building their confidence, and the easiest way to, a good start doesn't guarantee a good result, but it certainly helps it. Looking very nervous. Making them wait.
Yes, and they're off The European Cyclo-cross season had started here in Eeklo in Belgium, and it's very important to get a good start in the world of cyclocross so that you can get good positioning for the technicalities that are soon to come. We're going to get our first look of the course, as you can see very shortly, which has changed quite significantly since it was used just a couple of years ago. Far more twists and turns, but it's actually a slightly more compact course than we saw back in 2017. Looking to see who that is on the front there already, leading them out.
It's number 5, so that is Maud Captains.
Maud Captains, yes,
Definitely
another
one of the
rider
favourites for the race.
who is looking to start the season off with a bang. We just mentioned that it is early for a cyclocross race, the 8th of September, but when you consider that the Iowa World Cup is just 6 days from now, quickly followed by the second World Cup just a week later, it's not really too early to be informed, because those opening World Cup races can be incredibly important in terms of racking up points for the overall. And in fact, Tone Arts won both of those last year and went on to win the World Cup overall. So that just goes to show how important it is. So I'm sure lots of these ladies here are going to be absolutely pinging already, having done a lot of training on the lead up to this, the first race of the year.
Yeah, and you know, you can see the you can just see the contrast between a race in December. First of all, there are fans in t-shirts and everyone's in short sleeve skin suits. So if you're bringing some road form, or you're feeling pretty fast coming out of summer, it translates pretty well to this sort of thing. And then the difficulty comes when you're trying to adapt to the slow sloggy races, which could feasibly come from any time in October. Anna Kay from Great Britain is currently in second place there, so great start for Anna. Yeah,
she was phenomenal last year, Anna Kay, wasn't she? She's just turned 20 back in May. She one of the big surprises and phenomenons of last season, in my view, and she, as you said, has moved up into second place. This year she is riding for the Experts, a pro cyclocross team, so she's got a couple of teammates in here, and if she improves on last year, then there's no reason why she can't go on to win a race like today.
Certainly not. She looks pretty relaxed. You can see she's bib number 33, so I think she had a second or third row start there, but was able to make her way through on the pretty open start straight, took the right line through the first corner, and already you can see the gap across the top 10 is pretty big, and while not impossible to close, definitely somewhat uncomfortable if you were in the position where you had to do that.
Yeah, already some of the favourites coming to the fore in the first 4 positions there. So Captains, the number 5 on her back there, leading this out on the first lap. Anna Kay right on her wheel. There's a small gap already opening up to, I think that might have been Los Cells in third place there. She starts with the number 30 on her back. She's riding for the Eco Crelan team. 34 years of age is Lewis Sells, and just behind her, the under 23 champion, very visible in the orange there, riding for the CCC team, that being Evander Hutton. So the 4 up front, clear with the advantage already, and halfway through the opening lap of this race.
Yeah, and you can see kind of Captains and Kay were slightly ahead of the rest for the first part of that first part of the lap, and Anna Kay looked like she was actually kind of carrying quite a bit more speed through the corners than Captains, so it'd be interesting to see. That definitely saves energy. If you're faster through the corners, you use a few less watts to kick out of them, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the course of the race.
She's a very slight rider, isn't she, Anna Kay, when you look at her, even compared to the others in this leading group. She's visibly smaller than the rest, but obviously got a lot of power in her legs. Here's one of the technical bank sections. We've seen a couple of the sand ones. It looks less like sand and more like dirt to me in this race last year.
Yeah, I think, but it's showing one of the real difficulties from dry racing, which is when it gets really wet and muddy, it will kind of cut up and obviously get deep muddy ruts. Here, what was happening is the ground was just kind of starting to fall apart, so it has a similar effect to sand. Like, it's very difficult to kind of keep traction. You could lose your rear wheel or even your front wheel, and that was really bumpy, really off camber, and also very loose. That's certainly a feature that is not going to get easier as the race goes on.
What are the considerations when it comes to cyclocross equipment when it's as dry and dusty as it is today versus when you get to the mud later on in the season?
I think you're possibly asking someone with slightly outdated view here, but they're definitely not going to be using mud tyres, somewhat obviously. Most of the riders, I imagine, will be on a kind of typhoon style tread, so a pretty good all-condition tread. A few of the riders, if they've got kind of maybe more pairs of wheels, may have a pair of file treads which they choose to use. Kind of wider tyres, particularly with the sand sections. You can see that
And okay, just losing her footing there on the sand section after she dismounted from her bike, and that's cost her a few bike lengths. So we've got one rider with a fairly clear advantage at the front because of that. It's always quite interesting to see, as we see a replay here of Barricades getting it slightly wrong as she came around that corner, overbalancing to the right slightly and having to. Well, she pretty much fell over, didn't she? And that also caused a bit of a delay to the riders behind her, and that has left Evander Hutton with a few metres advantage briefly over the rest of the field behind. But it is interesting also looking at the number of riders using disc brakes here. I spotted one rider using cantilever, sort of old school rim brakes a few moments ago, but I would say at least 90, probably 95% of the field here in both the women's and the men's races is going to be using discs.
For sure, and you can see actually Anna Kay's kind of little, I guess, stall is probably the right way to describe it in the sandpit there, has played to her advantage as much as Inga van der Heijden. So Kay's clearly been strong enough to reset. The other riders behind her obviously faced some kind of difficulty and had to stop as a result of Kate's stumble. And now Kay is right on van der Heijden's wheel and looking pretty comfortable.
Looking very good indeed, yes. Clear advantage there over the next rider, which is number 14, Shirin van Anrooy. I'll tell you a bit more about her as well. She was the one I was talking about earlier, actually. So she is looking particularly menacing, Shirin van Anrooy. Riding for Team 185, as mentioned at the start of the show, but if you missed it, she has just become the junior individual time trial champion of Europe. She's also the national champion in that discipline of the Netherlands too. Just 18 years of age, but also does a lot of very competitive running, triathlon and duathlon. And she's probably had to make her way up from the back of the grid today, lastly, albeit only 26 riders on the start line today, but impressive stuff nonetheless.
Certainly, and you know, for Shirin van Anrooy with that sort of background, come the muddier hilly races, it could be interesting. If you're a comfortable runner in that sort of situation, you face a huge advantage. All the cyclocross riders will run a lot in training, but if running isn't your first sport or something that you do a lot of year round, it kind of hurts your legs. Hurts my legs anyway if I have to run. I don't know about you, Dan.
I actually did my first run yesterday for a very long time indeed. 5.5 kilometres lastly. I was pretty slow, it has to be said. I'm sure that I'd be about half the speed of Shirin running around here at the moment. Anyway, two riders now with a very clear advantage. Two of the youngest ladies in the race, in fact. Anna Kay of Great Britain there at the front, number 33. To remind you, riding for the Experts of Pro Cyclocross team. And then the rider from CCC Liv is Inga van der Heijden, the under-23 world champion. Two young guns. It's been a year for young guns in the world of road cycling, and it might well be that case as well in the world of cyclocross, if this is anything to go by.
Yeah, definitely. I think, looking at the way that Kay and Van der Heijden are riding, they look seriously impressive here. Obviously, when Sanne Cant comes back, that will, we'd expect Sanne to be winning, or at least towards the front. Very interested to see if Pauline Ferrand-Prévot and Jolanda Neff also return. They'll probably return more like November, December, if they want to do a shorter season and target the Worlds. But it's, could see some seriously competitive races that are very, very hard to predict this year.
Achterwolders, you just saw on your screen there, that is the Flemish or Dutch for following riders. So you've got two in the lead, two riders following them, probably already about 10, maybe 12 seconds behind. So we seem to have a clear hierarchy already by laps 2. And as you saw, they completed the first lap in around 6.5 minutes. So it's quite a short course and very fast as well as they go over the planks here.
Dismounting for the barriers there.
Yeah. We are starting to see a few more of the ladies jumping over and bunny hopping over the barriers, but predominantly most of them still get off. It will be interesting to see whether the men remain on their bikes. Sometimes there's not much in it in terms of the actual speed you go over dismounting versus trying to bunny hop them.
Definitely, I think particularly for some of the older riders in the field, they'll come from a time where the barriers were created and the legislation around barrier height and barrier distance basically fundamentally made them pretty much impossible to bunny hop, and if you were skilled enough to bunny hop them, there was often pretty much nothing in it and between riding and running. So
are they lower now then?
They're now lower. So previously, a very long time ago when I raced, they would have to be they'd have to be 40 centimeters high and 4 meters apart, which if you hit them at speed and try to bunny hop makes it very difficult to clear both.
Yeah.
I found it personally difficult to clear one, but there we go. And then now they can be lower and they can be further apart as well to encourage that skill element from the riders. But I remember, for a long time it was only really riders like Sven Nys and Tom Meyerson who were bunny hopping those type of barriers, and even then they would do it somewhat selectively. So now I think it's fantastic that those rules have been backed off a bit to make it kind of more possible to do it, and then also mean that, you know, particularly younger riders actually have a more in-depth introduction to pretty important cycling skill.
Sophie de Boer just going through there in the pink. She was not far behind Laura Bedonschot, a 23-year-old Belgian riding for the Power Sozon Bingo team. As I mentioned, she's a multiple-time under-23 champion. Going back to the barriers, that's another video that Jeremy has done for us recently, how to bunny hop over the barriers. It's an exciting time for cyclocross last year, because given how amazingly well a lot of the top men's and women's cyclocross riders have done on the road this year, I kind of feel like it's going to reinvigorate this sport, because I think there's going to be a lot of young people watching their favourite road riders, the likes of Van der Poel, the likes of Marianne Vos, look at them racing consistently over the winter in cyclocross and think, well, if that's what they're doing, I'm going to give it a go as well, because it's not just the fitness aspect as well, it's also the technique aspect that you get from cyclocross. It does transfer over to the road and help you in the peloton.
Certainly, and I think, you know, I can only speak from personal experience, which is pretty kind of restricted to the UK for grassroots racing, but it's a hugely popular grassroots sport. It's very safe, you know, you're not anywhere near open roads or cars, which you might be if you were racing on the road in the UK or perhaps in the US. And there are huge fields in youth under 12 races and junior races, so it's a great way to kind of dip your toe in the water if you're thinking to start cycling, and it's also a really safe way to do it, and fun and great for skills. So we can see Evander Hutton had a slightly cleaner ride through the sand again than Anna Kay, so Kay's just got a couple of seconds to close there. I imagine that will close up on the road section. We're getting a replay here. Oh, so that's number 11, so that is Karen Verstraeten going down and taking number 10, Marion Norbert Ribeiro with her.
Proving troublesome for a number of the riders in the race, that sand section there, isn't it? 2 laps now done, and we have 2 20-year-olds leading this race. We just had a comment in from Nick Tarry asking how old Kay is. Is she 21? No, she turns 20 on the 6th of May, so she's just a few months into her 21st year, I guess it would be now. And also Ange van der Heijden, she turned 20 just a month or so ago from the Netherlands. So 2 very young riders at the front, and then we've got a junior rider here, or at least junior on the road this year, number 14, Shirin van Anrooy. They'd actually closed up a few moments ago, but I think there were more problems in the sand sections for those 2.
Yeah, Van Anrooy had a really clear ride as far as I could see it, so I don't know if she actually rode most of the sand. I don't know if she had some trouble on the exit. Looking like Kay is pretty content to sit in the wheel there. You could see Van der Heijden signalling for her to come through. She's coming through now. Takes the inside line on the corner. Very confident through the corners, actually. It looked like she carried more speed and took a tighter line than Van der Heijden into that corner, so clearly a very technically skilled rider, perhaps more so than her direct competitors today.
Well, it's definitely a course where slipstreaming will come into play. On the more technical ones, it's normally more advantageous to be on the front, isn't it? So you get a clear view of all the technicalities coming up. But when you've got a course as fast as this one, despite the banks that they're going up now, on those flat fields, you're going to get a distinct advantage from sitting on the wheel, and that is why Van der Heijden was encouraging Kay to come towards the front to help her on the way. Incidentally, if you are new to the world of cyclocross, it's generally done on a time basis plus 1 lap. So today's elite women's and under 23s will be 40 minutes plus a lap. So we're 30 minutes through that now, about a third of the way through the race, just a little bit over that. 2 clear leaders at the moment, and then a small gap back to Van Anrooy and also Lewis Sells, who's riding for the Eco Crelan team. A couple of riders from that squad here today. She's easily the most experienced of all these riders. She's in 3rd place there now, just going through your picture. Now 34 years of age is Lewis Sells. 17 wins. She's also got 2 daughters, so she's had to take some time off through her career for giving birth to her 2 daughters, and great to see her back and right at the front of the first international cyclocross race of the season.
Yeah, we've got a problem here. So no chain for that rider, number 35, Kim van der Putte. Real shame. That's a long jog back to the pits, and then probably a withdrawal from the race, I would imagine. So coming over the barriers again. Kay is putting her bike down between the barriers, so trying to save a little bit of energy carrying them instead of carrying them between. Ward captains coming up to the barriers now. Not quite on the pace today.
Well, it looks like we're going to have a group of 4 here at the front very shortly indeed as they come towards the end of the 3rd lap. 2 people asking how many laps are coming today, Jacob Treasure and also Arash Fassa. As mentioned just before, it's not done necessarily on the basis of a certain number of laps, it's done on time plus 1 extra lap. So I reckon they'll be doing about 8 or perhaps 9 laps today in total, but they will be aware of that. They'll be given the bell when they come through to the last lap of the race. They'll be aware of when the finish is. But yeah, 40 minutes plus a lap for the elite women's race here, and then I think the men's is normally 1 hour plus 1 lap.
Yeah, so they're just going into this kind of probably the most kind of tricky descent on the course. They're all handling that fine. Kay has to dab with her inside foot there, but really it's just a consequence of going in quite a busy group, quite close to the other riders. I think what you were saying about slipstreaming earlier is exactly right. You know, there's really on the flatter grassy sections, it's going to be very difficult for a lot of the riders to make much of a difference, because so long as you can stay within a second or two, you'll close that going through the corners or in one of the technical sections. So you're going to have to be very strong to go it alone this early in the race.
That's very true. I was also looking at the mistakes that Anna Kay's been making. They haven't cost us so far, but they will add up over the course of 40 minutes. It's quite a few times she's had to close a gap because she's been forced to dab her foot down or even come off the bike on the sandy section there. I wonder if that will pay off at the end of this race, or at least make things a little bit harder in terms of taking the win here today. So 4 ladies, all with a big chance of winning this first Ethias Cross. Just to remind you, this was the Cyclo-cross series last year, now known as the Ethias Cross, Ethias being a large insurance company in Belgium. The next round will be on the 5th of October in Moerlebeeke, then 1 week later Kruebeeke, Beringen, then Essen on the 7th of December, Bredene on the 30th of December, and then we have to wait until February where we have Maldegem on the 5th, and then finally the last round, Hoest on the 16th. I don't think that there are overall winners of the Ethias Cross. Certainly there wasn't with the Cyclo-cross last year. But each race there is also a public vote on the Bad Luck of the Day award. I'm not sure exactly how they're doing that, but it's certainly quite a novel award, which I've not heard of before.
What does one win for the Bad Luck of the Day
I
award?
don't know, actually.
A cask of beer, or, you know, kind of... What?
Some local beer, of which there is no local beer, according to you, Larcy.
Well, I couldn't find anything particularly local when I was Googling it last night. Maybe you win some better luck for the next race. So we've got a couple more questions coming in. Tim Barlow is asking, where is Jeremy? Jeremy is currently with Simon Richardson in Whistler, riding at the RBC Whistler Grand Fondo. They've been doing some updates on the GCN Instagram page, which is globalcyclingnetwork.com. So if you want to get an update on Jeremy, check in there. Then Tom Barton is asking about aero helmets, saying several riders are wearing aero helmets. How important is aero considering the speeds travelled in cyclocross? I'd say that, you know, today feasibly they could average close to 30 kilometres an hour. So aero is of a degree of importance, but more than that, I'd say an aero helmet's kind of warmer for the rest of your cyclocross season. So it might be a practicality rather than a kind of aerodynamic benefit choice for a lot of these riders. And then Patrick Hickey asking most of the riders on 1x or standard 2x setup, saying it seems a bit mixed at amateur level still. I think it will depend on their sponsors, so we can expect to see most of the riders who are SRAM sponsored riders will be riding 1x. That's SRAM's kind of chosen setup for cyclocross and suggested setup. And then the Shimano riders could be riding 2x as well, unless they've kind of got some sort of homemade setup there. I think really it comes down to sponsor preference first, and then if you have the choice, of course it's personal preference. But for most of these riders, they would spend the entire of this race in their big ring in any case. So I think single 44 tooth chainrings if they are choosing to go single.
Now, what would you have on a double on a course like today? Chainring sizes.
Again, I'd have to state my knowledge might be a little outdated here, because back in the day, Dan, we had 130 BCD chain sets, so the lowest you could go was 38, and then you could buy a 46 or a 44. I think realistically, when you look at the average of the average speeds for cyclocross races, a single ring kind of can certainly make sense, because you're not sure, you might hit 40, 45 kilometers an hour in the start straight, but for most of the race, you're going to be averaging 20, 22 kilometers an hour, and that could be quite a fast race. So I think they'll be on maybe a 36 inner, maybe a 38 inner, and then a 44 outer chainring. Really, if you've got 44.11, I think you can go fast enough in most cases.
Well, I'd like to once again welcome all of you who are joining us for this, our first live cyclocross event of the 2019-2020 season. Amongst you, we have Iveka. Thanks for streaming this, he says. Born in Eeklo, now living in Thailand. I did do a little bit of research on Eeklo earlier. If you're wondering where it is, it's kind of somewhere between Ghent and Bruges in the Flanders region of Belgium. In fact, they're looking to make a cycling museum there because it's the hometown of the legend in cyclocross that is Roger de Vlaming, also Monsieur Paris-Roubaix, who had an incredible number of podium finishes in cyclocross racing in his career. But it's also the location or the place where a guy called Van Ham lives, who's a collector of cycling memorabilia. So they're looking to use his memorabilia to create a cycling museum here in Eeklo, and that would in fact be the third cycling museum. I know one of them's in Oudenaarde, that's probably the most famous one. I'm not sure where the second one is, but might well have one here in Eeklo soon too.
Yeah, if you're in Oudenaarde, it's certainly worth checking out. It's a really cool spot, isn't it? So Anna Kay going through the barriers there kind of was able to, took them very smoothly and actually stretched out a little bit of a gap. So Anna and Evander Hutton maybe got up to 2 or 3 bike lengths between the other 2 riders in the group. So a very technically very skilled rider, and it's just little differences like that. We can see she's carried more speed into this descent than the other riders, although we haven't seen her yet. And she's got another couple of bike lengths on Evander Hutton, so definitely looking to stretch the others on some of the twistier sections of the course.
Yeah, just looking back through Anna Kay's results from the last cyclocross season, she came second at the British National Championships, which took place down in Kent. She was also the overall winner of the National Trophy Series here in the UK, which is the big national series that all the elite riders take part in and obviously try and do their best to win. Back in 2018, she was third in the National Championships, but I believe the under-23 national champion on that particular occasion. But she was right up there in quite a few of the international events last year, because I distinctly remember when Marty wasn't here having to do another commentary. It's not my preferred commentary cyclocross, because it's not my level of expertise really. Oh, I'd like to talk about Jolien Verschuren. I promised that I would a little bit earlier on. So it's great to see her coming back, because she had to have an operation to remove a malignant brain tumour in April of 2018. And this is her first competitive outing since that point. So obviously a major event in her life, something that's incredibly hard to come back to full stop. But to make your way back to elite level racing of any kind is really quite remarkable. So great to see Jolien and in fact her fan club that are here as well on the sidelines today.
Definitely fantastic to see her back, and what an inspirational story to make a return from something like that. Going through the sand there, we saw that Evander Hutton and also Anna Kay. Anna Kay looked as though she had the momentum to ride the whole section, but she was second wheel, so was forced to dismount when Evander Hutton dismounted. So that didn't split the group too much, but definitely looking like Evander Hutton and Kay may be the stronger technical riders of this group of 4 at the moment. Soon to be a group of 5, because Maud Captains is starting to come through the race and took that climb definitely very comfortably. And yeah, I imagine in the start-finish straight, we'll be looking at 5.
Yeah, she's not too far away from the back wheel of the 4th rider. Another slight mistake from Anna Kay there, pretty much caused by the fact that the rider Evander Hutton, who's leading in the CCC colours here, just stalled ever so slightly at the top of that bank, and it meant that Kay had to put her foot down a bit earlier. But every time she has to stall, she's almost immediately back up to the wheel again. It feels like she's got a little bit in reserve to me of these front 4, now 5 riders, Lasty, as we come to the end of lap 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's a somewhat important cyclocross skill to be able to clip in pretty quickly as a result of kind of getting back on your bike or a slight incident. So yeah, I'm sure that Anna Kay is going to be not suffering too much from those little incidents just yet. Be a huge result for Anna Kay either way at the moment. It's a fantastic ride so far. So number 4 just coming through the start-finish straight there is Laura Verdonschot of Pauls Sozen. So a source company.
Is it?
Yeah, so I'm guessing that they supply the sources for the many kind of Frit vans at the Belgian races.
Yeah, 23-year-old Belgian rider who's a multiple-time under-23 national champion in this discipline of cyclocross. They've done 4 laps, and as you can see, it says they're nog 2 ronde, which means 2 laps to go. So we're going to have 6 laps in total. So I was completely wrong about 8 or 9. 6 laps in total for the elite women's race, and we have 5 leaders here at the front who have still all got a fantastic chance of taking the opening European International Cyclocross race of the season. The Ethias Cyclo-cross here in Eeklo in the northern part of Belgium.
Got a few more questions come through, Dan. So we've got Nathan Simatapang has said, stupid question, no such thing, Nathan. What kind of cleats are they using for this type of race? 2-bolt. So yeah, they'll all be using mountain bike pedals for this, because you need to use mountain bike shoes so that you can run in them, and also the double-sided pedals are essential if you're off your bike and trying to clip back in. Another one has come in from Joe Wakelin, who says, 14, at the moment I'm only riding and racing on closed circuits or roads. Should I be doing another discipline like cyclocross or cross-country mountain bike? I think the answer is it would be good, but you should only do it if you really want to at 14.
Well, yeah, if you don't want to do it, then just don't do it. But I do think that doing other disciplines of some sort, apart from just road racing, can really add to your repertoire as a road rider, if that's what you end up taking up later on in life. It doesn't have to be cyclocross or mountain biking. It could also be track. Lots of course, very successful road riders, particularly from the UK and Australia, have come from a track background over the last few years, or last couple of decades, really. And I think, again, it just gives you an extra skill set. Going around in an indoor velodrome without any brakes, it just allows you to make snap decisions a lot quicker and to really analyse where you are in a bunch. And so you'll have to see the likes of Mark Cavendish. I think that's been one of the keys to his success over the years, is the fact that he came from a track background, and it's really transferred into his sprinting on the road, not just from the speed in his legs, but also from the decisions he's able to make very quickly in the last 200 or 300 metres of a road race. But as we've said at the start of our live coverage today, you've only got to look at the success of cyclocross riders on the road this year to realise that it's certainly not going to do you any harm if you compete in cyclocross over the winter and then want to do the road in the summer. Later on, we've got Toon Aerts riding as the Belgian national champion in the elite men's race. He was 4th in the Belgian Baloise Tour this year, even though that's not his main discipline, of course, but right up there with some of the biggest and best riders on the road in the world right now. So I would thoroughly recommend it. And it's a very safe way to get into cycling, isn't it, cyclocross?
I think kind of, if you're able to getting hold of a mountain bike or a cyclocross bike and just using it as part of your training or riding is certainly beneficial. It's good fun, skill development, and you don't have to race. You can just ride and enjoy it, and that will support your other racing if you choose to do so. So Maud Captain's there attacked into that technical section. She's come through very strongly after a slightly slower start than the other riders. And she's definitely starting to stretch them out a bit. We can see Shirin van Anrooy is kind of trailing 3 or so seconds off the back of the group, which is one of those really painful gaps to close, isn't it? When
Horrible,
you've just been gapped like that, and you can see them, but you can't quite sprint and shut it down. It's a bit of a killer, that one. So Anna Kay kind of slides back into second ahead of Loose Cells there. But you can see just with the distance that Captains is riding ahead of them, she's looking pretty much stronger than the other riders in this group at the moment.
It can be a confidence thing, though, can't it? If you've caught up with the group and then you go past them, you're running high on confidence. Whereas if you've been at the front, like we've seen with Evander Hutton and also with Anna Kay, if you then get caught by a group behind, it can also be detrimental to your head, can't it? You see, well, I was in a group of just 2 riders a few moments ago looking to take the win between one of us, and now I've got more riders to deal with, and they're looking pretty strong because, as you said, Captain has just gone straight to the front, put a couple of little digs in, and it has distanced this rider ever slightly. I would love to see that junior rider there, number 14, Shirin van Anrooy, take the win today, because that really would be quite incredible, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and look, you see the sand now. So the rut is getting more established, but at the same time, the exit to the rut is also getting more established as something to run, which is going to make it harder to ride out of the rut, but easier to ride further in the rut. So kind of slightly paradoxical challenge there. Captains was first off her bike again. Anna Kay looked comfortable riding slightly further, but was forced to dismount because that's what the rider in front of her did. Okay, so if we've got any more questions coming through, Vaughan Casey says, glad you guys are back. Well, Vaughan, we're certainly very glad you're watching, and we're very happy to have all of you along for this, our first cyclocross race of the 2019 to 2020 season. So please do help us get the word out, share it, tell us your thoughts down in the comments. And we've got, I don't know how many days of racing we have coming up, but it's a lot. A lapped rider there, that's number 7.
That was Jolien Verschuren, unfortunately. So as we mentioned, she's making her return to competition today. Not entirely sure why she decided to call it a day just then, but let's hope she enjoyed her return and that we see plenty more of her over this cyclocross season here on GCN Racing. Incidentally, if you haven't yet subscribed, you can do so by clicking on the subscribe button just below. If you go out of full screen, there's a bell icon there too. Clicking on that will allow you to get notified every time we have a live race or indeed some highlights. And we've got the Tour of Britain and Vuelta a España highlights coming for you later on today. Meanwhile, back to the race. 1 lap to go here in Eeklo for these front runners of the women's elite race. We've now got a clear gap between the first 3 riders, they being Maud Captains, the Dutch rider running for the Power Sozon Bingo team, the CCC Live rider and under-23 world champion Evander Hutton, and finally another 20-year-old Anna Kay riding for the Experts of Pro Cyclocross team. These 3 seem lastly to be the strongest of our 26 field today. Who do you think is going to take the win?
Well, Evander Hutton is losing a bike length or 2 through most of the corners to the other 2 riders. So I can't. She will need to be very careful with her position. She's just overtaken Anna Kay there, just to kind of feel a bit safer in second place. You're not forced to take 2 other riders' lines. I don't know. It's very hard to say. Make sure you tell us your predictions for the win down in the comments. So, yeah, who do you think, Dan?
Well, it's now saying 2 laps to go again, so it might not be quite the last lap yet, so I might have to redo that a bit again when they go through the next one. But it certainly said 2 laps to go last time, and it's still saying 2 laps to go now. But I will admit, I didn't hear the bell just a few moments ago. So
I
they've
didn't
obviously
hear the bell, and if the riders did, it's certainly cruel. So we've got a question from Dan Slinky saying that he sees no bottles, which makes sense with all the bumps, but can riders use water backpacks or similar? So I think they can. Correct me if I'm wrong. My UCI rule knowledge may not be totally up to scratch there, but then I've never seen someone use a camelback or equivalent in a cyclocross race. I think it would get in your way too much if you had to shoulder the bike, and that's the first reason I can think of. They can take water with them. If cyclocross riders do take water bottles with them, they'll usually have the bottle on the seat tube, again, so that it doesn't interfere with carrying the bike. But also on hotter races, there's dispensation from the commissaires to take water in the pits. One thing you can't do normally in cyclocross is take food or water during the race. You'd have to start with it unless there's special dispensation based on the race. So Anna Kay is remounting very quickly there. She just overtook Evander Hutton again. Shirin van Anrooy coming up.
Phenomenal ride really from her when you consider it just about 6 weeks ago she was winning the European Junior Individual Time Trial Championships. And she's now looking very good here in this world of cyclocross as well. It'll be interesting to see exactly how much she does over the course of this winter in the cyclocross fields. Do you have to get special dispensation as a junior? I mean, in fact, she probably won't be a junior category rider, will she, in cyclocross, because you move up a little bit earlier than you do on the road?
No, I'd have to check the schedule of these races, but they have now split the junior women's race out from the women's. So the Women's Cyclocross World Championships was introduced in 1999, which is definitely more than a little too late to recognise international women's cyclocross. Yeah. And at that point it was open from junior riders upwards, so all categories of female rider race together at the World Championships. Since then they have moved to split it, so there's now an under-23 race as well, where I believe under-23 and junior take part.
It does look like today's win is going to come from those front 3 riders, doesn't it? Luce Sells there just rolling through a few seconds back, riding for the Eco Creeland team. She's been distant, he almost got back on, but these 3 up front are clearly stronger than the rest today. We did have a group of 5, went down to 4, and now we've got 3, but all to play for between these 3, and very little to separate them really. As you rightly pointed out, Lastly, Captains does look full of confidence, full of vigour here at the front. She's sprinting out of all the corners, and in fact Evander Hutton in the orange there just behind is showing some signs of fatigue on her face when she's having to sprint to keep up with Captains out of some of the corners. Kay for me is the dark horse. She's been looking very sprightly throughout, although she might pay for a few small mistakes that she's been making in the sandy sections over the last few laps. So we'll wait and see. A lot still to play for. We think there is still 1 lap to go after this one. They said 2 laps to go, 3 laps to go, and now they've said 2 laps to go, 1 lap ago as well, if that makes any sense to you. So we're expecting the bell this time through.
Let's hope the riders don't sprint and celebrate too early in that case.
Well, it's happened before, hasn't it? Even in the World Championships a couple of years ago. Was it the junior men's?
No, so it was the under-23 World Championships in Zolder in 2016. Adam Tupelik, the Czech rider, was phenomenally strong. Kind of came through, smashed his second to last lap, thought he'd won, celebrated like very vigorously, to borrow your word there, Dan. Like, he was pretty excited, pretty excited chap. I have to say, I'd be pretty excited just to be in that sort of position in the race. And then got overtaken by 5 or 6 riders as he kind of slowed up to greet his swan years after his mistaken celebration, and then made his way back to 4th or something like that at the end of the race.
It's got to be the worst feeling in the... Well, in fact, you know what the feeling is like, don't you? Because you won a Premier Calendar, or at least you thought you had, but you hadn't.
Yeah, I think, understand I might have done it if I hadn't celebrated too early, actually. No, it's embarrassing, but I think you have to see the funny side. I'm not sure I can see the funny side at a World Championships. Getting the bell now. Yeah, 1 lap to go.
Well, I have to say, I still didn't hear the bell.
I heard it slightly, yeah.
Okay, well, we think there's 1 lap to go here at the first International European Cyclo-cross race of the season here in Eeklo. It's the first round of the Ethias cross, an 8-race series taking place between now and the 16th of February, where the last round is in Hulst. We have 3 riders at the front. It's been made captains there. The number 5 riding for the Power Sozon Bingo team, who's been on the front for probably the last 2 laps. In her wheel, number 3, Evander Hutton, riding for the CCC Live squad, and then another 20-year-old, Anna Kay, riding for the Experts, a pro cyclocross team, is bringing up the rear of this trio at the moment. So just around 5 minutes to go now before we will crown the winner of this first elite event in the European cyclocross season.
Yeah, Anna Kay actually entered the course after the start-finish straight slightly off the back of the other 2 riders, but absolutely flew around the first 2 corners to close that gap of a couple of buttons down. We've got some questions coming in asking if there is any way to watch this live stream in the USA, and we're afraid that there isn't, at least not with GCN. We don't have the rights to broadcast it in the USA yet, but we're certainly looking at adding more places and more races, Dan, I think it's safe to say. Anna Kay now to the front, stretched it out there.
Yeah. She's been waiting in the wings in 3rd place for quite some time, but she went straight round the other 2 a few moments ago. It's only a small gap there, but she has been looking the most sprightly to me of those 3 at the front throughout this entire race. 37 minutes into it now, literally 3 or 4 minutes left to go, but it's all back together here at the front of the race. 3 riders in the lead. It's going to be between these 3 to take the win here in Eeklo today. It's quite a hard course to get a gap on last, isn't it? Because it's so fast, even if you get 2 or 3 metres, once you're in the slipstream of one of the flatter sections, it's quite easy to get back on, and that's what we've been seeing so far. But Anna Kay is really attacking this final lap now and is clearly feeling very strong.
I think at the same time as it being quite easy to get back on, if you are able to get a gap and put someone really out of the range of benefiting so much from your slipstream, it's kind of one-on-one. So if you only gap them by a couple of seconds, they'll probably make it back. But if you're able to get 4 to 5, as Anna Kay is kind of hoping to here, she has been faster through the barriers than all the other riders on every lap, really. So she's remounting particularly quickly. Captains has been remounting less cleanly than Kay, perhaps. So Kay goes there and starts to accelerate through the corner. She's definitely got a couple of seconds.
It's a small gap, but it could be a significant one. They will all be well into the red by now, coming in towards the finish line of this first European race of the season. Absolutely flat out from here to the line. And in fact, it's Evander Hutton of the Netherlands who's made her way back up to the wheel of Anna Kay here. So this really couldn't be closer for the season opener here in Europe. Who's your money on now, Lassie? I'm still going to go for Anna Kay. I just think she's been looking very good. But as I say that, Evander Hutton has just gone into 1st place. Not long to go now.
And that's probably where Kay, given her technical skill, wouldn't have wanted Evander Hutton to go into 1st place there, and also captains to go into 3rd, because it's one of the sections where Kay could definitely get a few seconds out of the other riders, and you can see how much more you have to slow down and kind of give yourself a bit of breathing room, a bit of visibility when you go into a twisty section like that, this 3rd wheel. Okay, so heading back out to the straights. Evander Hutton looks like she's taken her foot off the gas slightly there. They are regrouping.
Well, it really is a brutal sport, isn't it? The world of cyclocross. It's just hundreds really of short, sharp efforts out of every corner, up every small bank, getting on and off the bike. Your heart rate sky high from start to finish in a cyclocross race. So to try and find anything extra at the end can be incredibly hard. But that is generally what separates the best from the rest, really. Lots of people can keep up, but the ability to go even deeper into the red towards the finish is something that makes the big difference when it comes to the end of a cyclocross race. And at the moment, it's Maude Captains back on the front. She's the most experienced of all the riders here in that front group. She is now coming up to 25 years of age in just a couple of weeks' time. Do you think she's got what it takes? It's still nothing really in it between these first three riders.
No, certainly not. I just don't know. So Captains is trying to ride as far as she can in the sand. She looks like she's got it.
Not that's going to be a costly mistake.
Not quite. Not so costly. She squeezed Evander Hutton out there, so that is maybe like Anna Kay. We can see this again. So Captains is kind of like takes a bit of a digger with her front wheel. Evander Hutton's seen it happening, gets off her bike, and then Captains kind of pinned her up against the tapes on the side there. Not an unfair move, just a slightly kind of assertive move, you might say.
Well, she's been a definition of determination so far in this race, Captain. She was distanced in the opening lap or two. She had to claw her way back up to a group of what was 3, maybe 4 riders in the opening couple of laps. She went straight to the front. She's been riding hard ever since. Briefly overtaken by both Kay and Evander Hutton, but now right on the front again. And even with that mistake, she went straight back to the front again, and that's just another slight slowing.
Squeezes Anna Kay there.
That's happened a lot to Kay in this race. She's just had to step off the gas because of something that's happened in front of her. And as I said at the start, I think she might pay for that at the end of this race.
Well, here we are at the end of the race. So Captains.
Yeah, Maude Captains looks like she's going to take this one. They're on to the finishing straight. She's sprinting out the saddle. She's pointing to her sponsors. And Maude Captains of the Netherlands and Pausen Season Bingo team takes the first win of the season. Inge van der Heyden having to settle for second place on the day. Anna Kay of Great Britain and the Experts of Pro Cyclocross team taking a well-deserved third, but I think she might have been hoping for better than that given how she was riding today. But that was a brilliant way to start the season.
Yeah, fantastic start to the season. So that's, looking quickly through, that's definitely the best European result for Kay. Great start to the season for her. Also very close to Evander Hutton, who beat her at the World Championships last year in Bogense in Denmark. So
Low Sales taking 4th place on the day, and the rider of the day for me has to be Shirin van an Rooij there, number 14, who was, well, I hate to keep mentioning it, but junior European individual time trial champion from just a few weeks ago. She competes in so many different disciplines, on the road, in time trials, in cyclocross, but also in duathlon and triathlon, and she's incredibly good at all of them. So I wouldn't be at all surprised to see her winning a big race at some point through this cyclocross season. Number 4 coming in is Laura Verdonschot, also riding for the Power Sozon Bingo team. She takes 6th place on the day today, and there's a small sprint coming here. I think that's Ellen van Looy riding for the Telenet Fidea team, who takes 7th, and number 31 there is Alicia Frank, also riding for the Experts of Pro Cyclocross team.
Number 12, so that is
no chain as well.
No,
there is a chain, but it's tangled up at the bottom.
Yeah, it's a chain, but it's not working. Scooting along. It didn't look particularly comfortable or efficient, but you've got to get to the finish, right?
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed that. What a great way to start the cyclocross season.
Definitely. I reckon that I remember kind of, oh yeah, it's a bit of a tangle, that, isn't it? Using a 2x setup in answer to one of our earlier commenters rather. I remember like the kind of the feeling of like lung burn from the first cross race.
Oh man, horrible. It's like having barbed wire in your lungs, isn't it? After the opening couple of laps.
It's not the efforts in a cross race are not something you can replicate really in any other kind of racing or even in training. So, interview with Inge van der Heyden now.
No, we are not going to get the interviews for you because they will be conducted in Dutch. So I'm sorry if you are fluent in Dutch and would like to listen to them, but most of the people viewing, including myself and Lasty, are not very good in Dutch at all. I can kind of understand roughly what they're talking about if they're commentating on a bike race. But
yeah, you did some flawless translation there with Achtervolgers and Nog 2 Ronde.
Yeah, Nog 2 Ronde, 2 laps to go.
And
even though there were still 3 laps to go.
I heard you're very good at ordering a beer in Dutch as well, but
yeah, well, I'm pretty good at that in most languages. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us for the Elite and Under 23 women's event here in Eeklo. We're going to take a very brief break now before we come back with the men's Elite race in just a few moments' time. But in the meantime, feast your eyes on Jeremy Powers, who's an expert in all things cyclocross, and a few of the videos he's done for us at GCN over the last few weeks. We'll see you shortly.
We're counting down the days, not weeks, days, until the cross season starts here in New England, where I'm from in the United States. It's a very exciting time. So I decided to put together some tips for your pre-season cyclocross checklist to make sure that when you hit the track, you're ready to go. Okay, so first up, we're going to talk about equipment. Now, during the preseason, it's really important to go through all of your gear from last year to make sure that your equipment is on point. Why? Well, if you do all this training and you condition your body and you're feeling strong, you get out on the cross course, you go through that first bump, bars go down to the ground, chain's broken, shoe broke, not cool. So I'm gonna show you guys a couple of the things that I do every year to make sure that I'm ready to go. First up would be the cleats. They need to be replaced. If you have loose old cleats, you're gonna be jumping a barrier or jumping an obstacle in cyclocross, and you can pull out of your pedal and then you can have a recipe for disaster. On longer rides, loose cleats make a lot of wobble, knee issues, not good. So how do you get the cleats to be in the same place every time? Well, because I'm using the exact same tread and pattern that I have from shoe to shoe and year to year, you can see that this one measures up at 19 and this one also measures up at 19. It's a really simple way. It might be a millimeter here, a millimeter there. You got to make some small adjustments after you get out on your first ride. You go back and you check them out, but overall, I've used that technique with a lot of success. First things first, you got to get out in the garage and you got to get that bike. You got to see what's going on with it. If you're like a lot of my friends, your bike is probably still filthy from being hung up after the last race of the season in December or January. You finished the national championships, you were exhausted, you don't want anything to do with cyclocross, and you got straight into some pie around the holidays and your bike got hung up dirty. You gotta get that thing down, you gotta get it out in the light, and you gotta see what needs to be replaced. So we got the bike out in the light. It's obviously filthy. It needs a good cleaning. But if your bike's been sitting for a while, it's been in the garage, you haven't ridden it much, you really do need to check everything out. Things that I would just replace right off the bat automatically if you haven't ridden the bike in a while, because you're not gonna remember when you replace the chain or this or that. Chain's gotta go. It's probably got some rust, it got beat up, it got hung up dirty, it hasn't been properly cleaned. It's gotta go. Fresh chain. Next up, you wanna check out your tires. What the heck were you thinking hanging up your tubular tires, or really any tires, for 6 months without touching them? I don't know, but tubulars in particular, you want to make sure that you push on the sidewalls and that you check to see if any of the glue is cracking or you have any other issues or imperfections with them, because tubulars are like really need to be maintained and taken care of accordingly. If you've got regular tires like these ones, these Conti cyclocross tires, then yeah, you just need to check and make sure that there's no cuts or burrs or any sidewall abrasions, anything that would make your day really bad. So take a good look at that. If you're using a battery powered system like ETAP or Shimano's electronic system, then you want to make sure that the batteries are all charged up and everything's firing perfectly. Then lastly, you want to look at the brakes. You probably want to check and make sure that your pads still have plenty of wear left on them. Otherwise, got to replace those. And then you want to make sure if you're running hydraulic that you've got a bleed, a fresh bleed. And if you're running cables, well, then you know the deal. You got to replace the cables. New cables and housing for sure for a bike that's been sitting hung up dirty since last December. So we're moving on from the bike and we're now going to talk about the body. What have you been doing in the off season? Hopefully some road riding or racing or some gravel stuff, but hopefully you're in shape enough to take on some runs. You got to get out there and you got to start doing some runs or get in the gym. For cyclocross, it's not all about just going up a hill and pedaling out on the roads. No, you need to have dexterity and agility and speed. And you don't want to get into your first cross race and then be sore for a month afterwards because you didn't do any prep. So I always recommend to do at least twice a week, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, which is like 1 or 2 miles, just to get your muscles ready so that when you do get out there on the course and you have to run with your bike, your body's prepared. So another big suggestion that I often make is to find a cyclocross specific coach, someone that has experience that can sort of guide you in the right ways. You don't want to be trying to go down one road to come back up to go down another one. No, you got to have a good coach that knows what they're doing to help you prepare. I always recommend too a good cyclocross camp, someone that's experienced, that knows their stuff, that can give you the basics and teach you exactly what you should be doing, how to get on and off the bike, things that we're going to go over in subsequent videos down the road, but definitely should do that and make time if there's one local in your area. So my last tip is make sure you look at your local race listings and see if there are any cyclocross training races around. They're usually 20 or 30 minutes long. It's a great place to go over your bike, see if your body's doing what it's supposed to be doing, blow out all the cobwebs, and it's a great place to have a lot of fun. It's too much to get right into the cyclocross season full gas. So doing like a shorter training race to make sure everything's firing on all cylinders is a great way to start your season. And they usually happen around this time of the year, August. So that's my last tip for you guys. If you're loving this cyclocross content, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to leave a comment below, please do. If you want to check out some of the other cyclocross content that we have, check out over here. And if you want to subscribe to GCN, click right there. Okay, so you're new to cyclocross and you literally have zero local resources. There's no training race, there's nowhere to ride, you don't have a friend to go out with, so you need to build it. And how do you build it? Well, today's video is going to tell you about how to build a cyclocross playground, the tools you need, and the things to think about when you're doing it. First up, you want to make sure that you're picking an area that isn't home to someone, meaning like a dog park where it's really the dog owners are out there, they're enjoying time with their dog. Then you're out on the trail and you're running into them all the time. That's not good for anyone. Like even like a local swimming hole, people are coming up, they're toweling off, they're on the trail, and then whoa, a cyclist rips past them because you're doing an effort out on your training course. Make sure that you pick a place that's not super congested, but is close to town that people don't generally use. Also, you want to make sure that you get land use permission. You don't want to be on private property, cutting things down, creating a track. Don't do that. That's not good for anybody. Gives everyone a bad name. Check with the town, make sure they're okay with you tightening things up, using some existing trails, and it should be close to where everyone's living. That makes it really, really good and easy for people to be able to get to the training course. Last thing is you want to make sure that the terrain is compelling, right? You don't want to just go into an open field. That's not going to give you a lot. You're going to have a lot of setup, be a lot of course tape. Nah, go into a forest where there's going to be natural features that you can use and take advantage of. So depending on the area and the type of terrain, some of the tools that you could use would be a shovel, a rake, loppers, gloves, oh, and a bike. When you get to a new training area, you want to make sure that you look around at the terrain. You want to make sure you know a lay of the land. Imagine it as just a big square and you're starting over here, and then you want to make sure that you get over to there, but you want to make a nice continuous loop, looking at what the area has to offer. This area, as I look out right now, has this beautiful sloping downhill section that is going to make a really nice transition from this side of the course to the other. So make sure that when you first get to the track, you take a look around, you see what natural features are there and what you've got to work with. So now that you know the area and you have a general sense of where you're going, get your loppers out. It's time to take down these just little trees like this. You just want to make sure that things that are going to slap the riders that come out in the face or in the arms, you want to take those down because that's not fun for anyone. You don't want to look like you just got out of a bar fight and you just want to go do some cyclocross. You want to have to go home and explain that to your significant other. And I'm not talking about going in here like a skidder either. It's not like you've got a chainsaw out and you take down all kinds of big trees. Don't do that. That's not what I'm talking about. Just little things that are going to slap your arms and all that, rough out the course, and then you can start to see which features actually are out there for you to be able to use. Okay, so now we're going to start talking about technical features on the track. And first up is got to be off-cambers. In cyclocross, you got to have off-cambers and you got to have technical sections because ideally, if you're racing or you're riding around fast, you're trying to force a mistake because it's not just going up a hill as hard as you can go. It's about technical prowess as well. So we're coming into a section that my friends from the Jam Fund, which is a local nonprofit program that we have here in town, have created over the last year. And as you can tell, it is super, super narrow. You definitely have to get your foot out, maybe even kick a little bit because it is so treacherous, off-camber, technical. It is a really good feature, and it's pretty much any course around the globe is going to have something like this, and it's just going to make you a much better rider. Now, if you could find some sand or mud on your course, that would be perfect. These are regular features in a cyclocross course because when you're going through the sand, obviously it's super, super technical and makes it really hard. Mud is the same. These things are always moving underneath the tires, so it's never the same lap to lap. So if you have these features, it makes for a really fun, super challenging track that the riders that come out are going to really enjoy. barricades. What are you gonna do? You're in the middle of the woods. I don't wanna get my hammer and nails out there with a bunch of 2x4s lugging stuff in. You don't need to do that, not at all. Go in the woods, when you're out scouting around, find a log like this, drag it out into the middle of the course, nice open section like this where riders can bring some speed in, get set up, jump off, run over 2 logs in a row. That's great. When you're done with them, real simple, they're out of the way. Technical sections are very important and they're vast. They can be anything really, but the thing you don't want to do is have tons of routes like this going across the track, big old rock gardens with rocks with pointy sharp heads all over the place, because cyclocross bikes aren't designed for that. They don't have any suspension, their tires are generally pretty narrow, and if the riders are doing that, they're just going to be getting jolted all around. You really want to do a reroute if an area has tons and tons of roots and rocks in it, because like I said, the bikes aren't designed for it. And you want to pick the path of least resistance. You don't want to go into something that's like this where you're going to have to take down all kinds of big trees. Look for an area that kind of seems like it flows, maybe an old deer path or something. That's going to be your ticket. Another nice feature to have out on the course is a wide open area like this, where riders can actually take a break and relax for a second from all the technical features that you've included in your course. It's also a place for the more experienced riders to be able to lay a lot of power down and take some time away from their rivals. Drops. Drops are a feature on a cross course that make it really, really challenging, probably for your more advanced riders. But when you're out scouting the course, if you see a nice embankment and the trail's going right above you like this, just take a right and send it straight down. It is a really cool feature to have on your track. Run-ups are a classic feature on the cyclocross courses. Organizers and race designers love them because they push the riders cardiovascularly to the limit, and then they usually follow it up with a technical section right after to hopefully force a mistake and make the race more exciting. For your training course, it's really, really good to have an A and a B line. You want to be able to let the riders that are less experienced go around this section, but for the riders that are more experienced, you want to push them to get off their bike, get up the hill, and then it's nice in a training course at least to be able to have a place for them to remount so that they're ready for the next technical section. One of the last things that you need to think about is the rhythm or the flow of the track. How does it go? You've checked out all of the sections, you've dug them all out, you've made all these cool sections. Now you need to string them together to be able to make the flow of it and the rhythm right. The last thing you want to do is go down a steep drop, then have a huge run up right after it, then go down another steep drop and then another run up. That's not the real flow of a true cyclocross race. You want to make sure that you string the sections together with technical stuff followed by a nice long stretch, then another technical section, then a drop, then a barrier. Make sure that it has a nice flow to it. Once you get out there and you ride it, you'll know what works. You also want to be mindful of the lap time. You don't want riders to be out there for 10, 12 minutes, 4 or 5, 6 minutes, that's great. A little bit longer than that, it gives riders the opportunity to spread out. It allows you to add some more features. And as the course gets worked in, if you want to make it a little bit longer, then you can add a feature here or there like I showed you earlier in the video. So get your friends, tell the riders that are in your area, hey, we're making a cross course, grab those tools, go out there, make an afternoon of it, and then ride this stuff in. It can be super, super fun. So I hope you liked the video. If you guys tag me in some of the stuff that you've done, I'd love to see your work out there and what you're doing. If you liked this video and you want to give it a thumbs up, please do. If you want to leave a comment below, please do that as well. If you want to check out other cyclocross videos, look over here. And if you want to subscribe to GCN, click right there. If you've watched any cyclocross race over the last 5 years, then you notice that bunny hopping has become a prerequisite for the riders that are racing. And you might be thinking, yeah, that's great, but how the heck am I ever gonna bunny hop? Well, today's video is gonna get you in the game. the first thing that I teach at my cyclocross camps when I'm telling people how to bunny hop is to pull their front wheel up, get their weight back, and just pull the front wheel up. Simply, just being able to get in the zone and get that front wheel off the ground just a little bit is the first step in being able to bunny hop. So with the front wheel still on the ground, the next thing that I tell everyone to do is to get their rear wheel off the ground. And that looks like this. Just pulling up on the wheel, getting it off the ground, so eventually you can combine the front and the rear wheel. The next thing that you want to be able to do after a lot of practice on those first two bits is be able to do the front as one and then the rear as one. And then all of this comes back to timing. You want to make sure that when you're going over an obstacle for the first time that you get the timing right. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. So for the next step, there isn't a lot of investment on your part. I went down to my local hardware store, I got 4 pieces of rebar steel, I got my hammer that I had for a long time, and I walked into the woods and I pulled out 2 small logs. I'm gonna take the rebar and I'm gonna put it in the ground in front of each of these logs to hold them in place so that when I practice going over the barriers with that technique that I just taught you, the log doesn't roll all over my yard. So once you get your logs set up, you do your timing, you get the front wheel over, then the rear wheel over. You're not slamming the rear wheel. The nice thing about logs is that they're round and you won't dent the rim. I really, really like that. That's why I prefer to use logs if possible, and they're really generally easy to find. So I always say, start really low and work your way up. Next up is a traditional 2x4 barrier. So whether you're using a 2x4 as your first plank that you jump after you get through the logs, or you get to this 2x8 or 2x10 or 2x12, all the way up to 16 inches, which is the UCI's height for a race barrier, what is the difference between this and a log? It's big. This is much sharper on the edges and your ability to pinch flat or to smash your rim is very, very high. So I recommend thorn-proof tubes. Yes, thorn-proof tubes. You've probably never ridden with them because the ride quality is absolutely horrendous. This tube has never flatted. I've had it since the 10th grade. I'm actually not joking. My mom gave me these so that I'd be safe out on the roads, not flatting and having to switch flats. These tubes are very, very thick, but they're great for going in your tires to be able to jump barriers because they literally won't flat and you won't smash your rim, and you can keep practicing and practicing and practicing. I'd also recommend not using a brand new pair of lightweight carbon tubular wheels on your first foray into jumping barriers. So if you're able to set up a barrier like I have here in front of me, this is pretty traditional. This doesn't take a ton of carpentry work, although you should have someone that knows what they're doing to make the process a lot easier. This is a traditional 2x8 that you can buy at any hardware store. Then we've got another 2x4 and another one, which gets us up to 16 inches, which is the UCI's height for barriers. And as you can see, these just slide right in. So you can add and take them away based on the group that you have that's out there training. So lastly, again, make sure that you go slow. Every time I see someone go into the barriers after just a little bit of practice going really fast, it has never ended well. It's straight into the ground and it's not pretty for anybody. So recapping, you need to make sure that you've got good tires, no new brand new carbon rims. You want to have thick tubes so that it prevents those pinches and those dents. All that stuff makes a big difference, and you want to practice, 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 because if you get into a race situation, being able to implement this technique will save you a ton of time, and let's be honest, a ton of style points are going your way if you can execute this in a race from your friends. So whether you're a road racer or a cyclocrosser, learning how to bunny hop is a super important skill. On the road furniture out in the middle of nowhere, you sometimes need to pull up on the bars and get over it. It's really good. And cross, well, everything that I just said. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment below. If you want to check out other cyclocross videos, check out over here. And if you want to subscribe to GCN, click right there.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I just about managed to finish my mouthful of lunch before Jeremy finished, but at least we've got someone here who knows what they're talking about when it comes to cyclocross. Lasty and I are going to do our very best shortly to talk you through the elite and under 23 men's race here in Eeklo for the first round of the Ethias cross. Thank you to all of you who joined us for the women's elite race just a few moments ago. Very exciting, and I hope that the men's race lives up to it shortly. Just to go through the start sheet, sorry, I literally was finishing a mouthful. Number 1 on the start list, we talked about him earlier last year, but Toon Aerts, he is the Belgian champion, riding for the Telenet Baloise Lions today. They've got a huge number of riders in this field. They and Power Sozan Bingo must have about 10 or 12 each in this race. How much does teammates and the teamwork come into play in the world of cyclocross on a race like today, which is pretty fast?
Yeah, I think it could well do. You can see. Obviously, we're going to expect the two dominant teams to be Powell Sozan and also the Telenet Lions. I think it will come into play. I think we could see a group of 10 or so at the front of this race for quite a lot of the race. But I don't know. I think at the end of the day, it's still an individual sport. So if there's a team win, the rest of the team don't quite get the same credit or recognition. If they're not. The team is there to win. The team isn't there to get a team win, if that makes sense. So it's still the individuals, I think, will be going for it.
Well, if we look further down the start sheet, number 2 today is Michael van Turenhout. Number 3, Lars van der Haar, the Dutch rider who's been around for quite a long time now. He's still only 28 years of age, though, so plenty of life left in his legs yet, I'm sure. Number 4 is Laurens Sweek. Number 5, Quinten Hermans, another Belgian rider. Corne van Kessel is number 6. Number 8 is Gianni Vermeersch. Number 10 is the double world under-23 cyclocross champion, Eli Isbeth. He was usurped last year in the World Championships by Tom Pidcock, but he is a phenomenal talent, but one that has yet to take a really big win in the elite category. Could today be his day?
Yeah, actually, I was surprised to see that Isbeth was in fact still under 23. I thought he was out of that category now. But yeah, 2 world titles in 3 years as an under 23 is phenomenal. And yeah, I think we could well see him, particularly strong.
He's my tip for today.
Is he?
Yeah.
I think he's more one for the muddy races.
Well, I don't know anything about that. I just think that this year is the year of the youngsters in all things cycling. So I'm going to go for a rider who is still a current under 23. A little bit further down the list, we have Dan Suter, who last year was talking about earlier, who competed in a world mountain bike race, World Cup mountain bike race, should I say, just a few weeks ago, where he performed very well considering where he started. Tom Meursen, who last he beat at the Junior European World Championships in cyclocross many years ago.
Not the world, so
he's Mr. Bunny Hop, isn't he?
Yeah, he's very good at that. We've got a video of him bunny hopping over me, which was quite nerve-wracking.
Yeah, long time ago that, wasn't it?
Yeah,
5 years ago?
Yeah, what he did was he dropped his rear wheel onto me, and tapped me with it because he was that far in control that he could just do it. I remember him pulling this kind of stick thing out of the side of the wood, saying, "Oh, we'll do it on this." And Stefan, the filmmaker, and I both looked at it. Like, "Oh, that's kind of that high. How are you going to do that?"
Yeah.
Just did it, made it look quite easy.
He's good at jumping. How good is it at cyclocross these days? Because he was very, very promising as a youngster, wasn't he? But he never appears to really...
Yeah, he's a phenomenally good technical rider. So he's won, I think, 2 or 3 World Cups in his career, and those have been when it's been really icy and snowy. So kind of conditions that make everyone uncomfortable, he remains comfortable in because he is that good. I don't know, he had a second at a race last year. I'm not sure if it was Hasselt, but he stayed with Van der Poel for a really long time. It was
I remember that.
It was one of the faster courses, but I imagine how Meursen was able to do that is once he got in the slipstream, he was probably carrying a lot of speed through the corners, so his skill level enabled him to keep up with Van der Poel in that case. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see. What is he? He's he'll be 30 later this year, or 31 later this year rather. So kind of possibly heading into the prime of his kind of career, which is a very scary thought when you think that might be Van der Poel in 8 to 10 years.
I was going to say prime these days normally means sort of 20 to 21 years of age if you look at the road results this season. Incidentally, Tadej Pogacar, who's won 2 stages of the Vuelta a España, is the current Slovenian national cyclocross champion, although apparently he only came second on the day, but the winner was an amateur rider who therefore wasn't eligible to take the national championships.
To take the pro national championships.
Yeah.
So the amateur national, a weird case where the amateur national champion is in fact faster than the pro national champion.
Moving on further down the start sheet, we have Thijs Aerts, who's number 16 today, who I think is the younger brother of Toon Aerts. Dieter van Toornhout, who is most certainly the brother of Michael. He's the older brother,
cousin,
in fact. Is it cousin?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, I stand corrected. And then Bram Merlier, who presumably is the brother of Tim, the current national Belgian champion on the road, who's been performing very well in that discipline this year. Tim not present today. Quite a few riders have already made their way over to the US of A because we have the first round of the World Cup this coming Saturday in Iowa taking place, and a week after that it's the Trek World Cup in Waterloo. So it does kick off with a bang, the cyclocross season, even though we are only in September. Once again, thank you all for joining us today for our coverage of the first European International Cyclocross race of the year. Daniel Horn wrote in and said, not available in Canada, ? Unfortunately not, no. This whole rights thing is a very complicated matter indeed, as we are very quickly finding out. You can rest assured that we are doing our very best to get as much top level racing as we possibly can to as many territories as we possibly can, but in the meantime you'll have to bear with us. We're going to get you what we can get ourselves, but that hopefully will improve in the future. But please bear with us, we are doing our very best to give you as much racing as possible. Also, welcome to Rudy, who just put Lasty. Lots of comments like that on the comments on any video basically that Lasty appears on, either live or over on GCN. Another one from Miko. Can't believe my eyes. Lasty. Yes, it's real. He's here. He does do a lot of work for GCN, believe it or not, but behind the scenes.
It's a hologram, actually, isn't it?
Yes. The brick himself. Rollmop06 asking, is Van der Poel part of the race? No, he's not. He's currently racing at the Tour of Britain, which is stage 2 today. We do have daily highlights of that race for you coming up later as well. Restricted to, well, mostly worldwide. We haven't got it in Britain, ironically, but most of the rest of the world you'll be able to watch that. He's gradually building up to the World Road Race Championships, which are taking place also in Britain in a place called Yorkshire in just a couple of weeks' time, in fact, and he starts as one of the favourites for that. Before, I'm then sure he'll have a break and then return to cyclocross. But he has stated he won't be doing quite as many cross races this winter as he has done over the past few years. Yeah,
because he's aiming for the mountain bike race in Tokyo, isn't he? So he'll be... I mean, when he's raced mountain bike and been on form this year, he's looked pretty dominant. So I'm guessing he's aiming for the top step of the podium there. But he's going to need a slightly different level of preparation going into that season than he gave it this year, I would think.
Yeah. But he doesn't really need a whole load of preparation, does he, to switch from one discipline to the other, as we've seen very recently, because he won 2 rounds of the Mountain Bike World Cup a few weeks ago. And I think the following week he went back to road racing, the Arctic Race of Norway, and won the first stage in a bunch sprint by some margin as well. That guy really is quite phenomenal. Right, we have round about 3 minutes, I think, until the start of the Elite and Under-23 men's race. So I'm pretty sure we'll be able to switch over to coverage of the start line. Just as I say it, there we are.
That's Gianni Vermeer.
Yeah, Gianni Vermeer, number 8. We shall gradually go across all the rides on the front row. Makes a big difference being on the front row in a cyclocross race last year, doesn't it? Particularly here for the men's race. In the women's we had fewer than 30 riders, which makes it a bit easier to make your way through. But today we've got around 50 riders in the men's event.
Yeah, we do. So, yeah, you can see actually that... we had a few questions about tyres earlier, so I could see Vermeer was racing on Dugast Typhoons, so that's the kind of intermediate tread, 33mm and Flying Doctor, so that means that the sidewalls have some extra reinforcement allowing the riders to run them at a lower pressure, which I don't know how long it took you at the start when you first started cycling, Dan, but to work out that softer tyres off-road are actually faster than harder tyres. Something I had great difficulty wrapping my head around.
I never really... I only ever did a few races on a cyclocross bike. I did quite a few as a youngster on a mountain bike, which you can do in the local races here in the UK, and in fact most of the rest of the world, I think. But yeah, did a few on a cyclocross bike, but I don't think I put too much thought into my tyre pressure, which probably didn't do me much good. There is your number 1 and the current Belgian national champion of cyclocross, Toon Aert, who had a phenomenal season last year, where he won the 2 opening World Cup rounds over in the USA and went on to win that race, or that series, should I say, overall. There is his teammate, Quinton Hermans, the 24-year-old, also riding for the Telenet Baloise Lions team. How do you think his chances are today?
Yeah, it could be good. I mean, the Telenet Baloise Lions team have performed really well on the road. They were pretty dominant at the Flèche du Sud in Luxembourg, weren't they? Along with some other Belgian, kind of slightly smaller, non-UCI Belgian stage races. So the team is on good form. There's Elliot Isabit there, you can see. So yeah, could be interesting to see how they go.
Well, literally around, less than 1 minute now before the off. Once again, nervous times for all. It's always hard to know exactly where your form is before you pin a number on and begin racing, even if you've been doing some stuff over on the road, but they're about to find out very quickly. UCI Commissaire over there on the left-hand side of your screen will call them off, and their heart rate is probably already well over 100 right now.
Some very high white socks on the front row of the start line. Imagine we won't be seeing those, or they won't be white for very long once we get later into the cyclocross season.
Well, Isabet here looks particularly calm. I'm sure he's not inside, but he's still breathing through his nose at this point in time, the number 10. Incidentally, this year he's also racing for the Pau Sozan Bingo squad, who were, of course, very successful earlier on today. And they're off for the first major European cyclocross race of the 2019-2020 season. And Isabet had a decent start, but in the middle there, number 5, that is Quinton Hermans. Isabet takes the lead into the first corner of the day. So despite not looking particularly nervous on the start, he's clearly up for this race and leads the rest of the group through the first corners.
It's just a flood of Pau Sozan and Telenet Baloise Lions riders at the moment behind. Very few riders not racing for those teams that we expect to see at the front of today's race.
Well, the first of those is in number 5 position at the moment, that being Gianni Vermeer. He rides for the Creafin Fristads team. I have to be honest, I don't know exactly what they do, the sponsors of that particular team, but he's currently in 5th place now, so we have in the lead Pau Sozan for Isabet. They're also in, 5th position as well, and then a trio of Telenet Lions riders lying between 2nd and 4th, should I say. Toon Aerts hasn't had the best of starts, has he? In fact, I haven't seen him so far. There he is, the Belgian champion with number 1 on his back, outside the top 10 already, and that's a surprise.
Yeah, so Creafin does financing and Fristads does workwear, Dan.
Top Googling.
There we go.
Right, well, this is going to take quite some time to string out and quite some time to find a hierarchy at the front of the race, being such a fast course.
Forced off their bikes here on this. It's not a difficult climb to ride, but you can just see the level of traffic kind of making it very difficult for the other riders.
Well, it's a safer bet really at this point in the race, isn't it? When you say, as you point out, there's so much traffic that if you do attempt to ride it and somebody stalls in front of you, just that few seconds where you have to get off the bike, start running up the climb, can cost you 5, 6, 7 places in the early part of a cyclocross race. So that's, I think, why most of them were choosing to get off and run up those early banks.
Yeah, I think the thing with that is it's not one that they'd have to attempt to ride so much. They were all riding it pretty easily in practice and also in the race we saw earlier today, so I think it's probably just the amount of people trying to do it. So Tom Mason coming through there.
It's incredibly fast, isn't it, at the start of a cyclocross race. Speeds on the flat will be up towards 40 kilometres per hour once they get going, but the average today I would expect to be probably in the region of 30 kilometres per hour, which for those of you who go in old money.
Rides, everyone in the top.
Yeah. All bunny hopping over these barriers.
Interesting to see how easy it is to bunny hop slightly further back where there are more riders, but they all seem to be taking them pretty easily.
Yeah, not one of them's got off and run over these barriers so far.
You can see as you get further back, the riders are slightly less comfortable doing it. And
he went fast. Blimey.
He did, yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, so pretty much every single rider in the men's event is choosing to bunny hop over the barriers. They all got over safely now, but it's when the fatigue starts to kick in a little bit later on that mistakes can start to happen. So we'll see how they get on as this race progresses. It will be around about an hour of racing today in the men's event. We won't know exactly how many laps they're doing until they've completed the first 2 or 3, at which point you will have a number on your screen which indicates how many laps they still have remaining. And they'll be given that on a lap board on the side of the finish straight as well.
So you see a bit of a traffic jam on this section as well. Isabet looked relaxed before the start and will look relaxed going into the second lap after this because he's really got prime position and probably it seems funny to say that the lead of the race is going to be the most chilled, but of the favourites he's perhaps had the more relaxing first lap.
Well, it's a field that is mainly made up of Dutch and Belgian riders. In fact, I was looking down the start sheet earlier. There are very few from other countries. We have Gauthier Hain riding from France. He's number 33. We've got a Swiss rider in the form of Steli Felix. He is using number 41 today. And the only other non-Belgian or Dutch riders are Thomas Kopecky, who's from Czech Republic, should I say. I almost got it completely wrong, didn't I?
So Isabet's riding the sand here, Dan. Sorry.
Yeah,
not too much advantage, but he nevertheless he did. Interesting to see if people use that as an attacking ploy later in the race.
And the only other non-Belgian and Dutch rider is the under-23 British rider, Thomas Mine, who started with the number 50 on his sleeve and on his back. So we'll see how those four get on. But this is it's a discipline that is traditionally for the countries of Belgium and the Netherlands. That is changing slightly, but it is still them that dominate proceedings generally, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. They are, generally dominant. It's where the sport is most popular as a spectator. Oh, so who's that? That's number 2. That's Michael Van Turenhout and Gianni Vermeersch going down at the top of that hill. Vermeersch doesn't look too happy about it. When you see Vermeersch get back on, he got back on from his drive side. He's actually a rider who prefers to get off on the right-hand side of his bike. Most prefer the left. So what happened to Van Turenhout there? Just messed it up.
I'm not entirely sure. I think he got balked slightly by the rider in front of him, and you can see he was shaking his head as well. Not what you want, and that has created some daylight between the first 3 riders across the end of lap 1, and then Toon Aerts, who's leading the rest of the charge behind in 4th position. So he's done reasonably well out of that, because he was quite some way down in the middle of that first lap of racing. So 3 riders in front. Toon Aerts, the Belgian champion, just behind that. I was reading actually that on one of the Belgian websites, Toon Aerts said that he didn't feel like he was one of the favourites for today's race, and in fact he passed that mantle of favourite over to Laurens Sweeck and Michael Van Turenhout of the Power Sozan Bingo team. He says a tough week of training on the lead up to this week, this race this weekend should I say, before he tapers down for the first 2 World Cup rounds which come this coming Saturday and then the following Saturday too. He also says that this course doesn't suit him as well as it does Laurens Sweeck, so we'll see if he's right about that.
I'm not sure that anyone feels particularly well suited to their first cyclocross race of the season.
Well, it's always easy to pass the buck of favourite.
Yeah, I think people just feel sick.
It can be a shock to the system, can't it? However much road racing you do, it's just not the same as having to come out of the blocks flat out like you do in a mountain bike or a cyclocross race. In a road race, you always have a neutralised section. You generally don't, if you're one of the favourites, need to do too much towards the start unless it starts on a climb. So you can kind of ease yourself into it over the course of the first 2 or 3 hours. You don't have that in the world of cyclocross. You can't ease yourself into this race. If you're not in the first 10 or 15 riders at the end of lap 1, you're likely not going to win the race.
Well, like I think, as I was saying earlier, the closest that someone's going to get into easing themselves into this race is in Isabit's case, where he's at the front of the race and he can decide how to dictate the pace. Everyone else is chasing. Toon Aerts looks like he's out for another hard training ride again today. He hasn't let anyone else take the front of that group just yet.
Around about 3 seconds between the first 3 and then another trio of riders being led by Toon Aerts. In fact, 4 riders there. Gianni Vermeersch, after that incident, now down into 7th place in this race. So we have 2 riders from the Telenet Baloise Lions team at the front. Elisabeth is the rider behind them, and there you can see confirmation of who it is. Van Kessel is in the middle for the Telenet team. And we'll see whether those 3 are going to sail away with this or not. In the women's race earlier on today, we also had a hierarchy established after lap 1 with 3 riders in front, but we then did see mode captains pull through a couple of laps later, get onto the coattails, go straight past them, and then eventually take the win. So all is not lost if you're not in the first 3 at the moment. And in fact, Toon Aerts looks like he's about to make contact with that leading group.
But he's not the favourite, so... So let's see how he gets on when he gets there. Also, when he makes contact with this group, he'll make it 3 from Telenet, but Baloise Lions, and only 2 from Powell's Sazon. So Sazon rather. So yeah, interesting. Telenet for their Lions looking very strong. Coach Sven Nys clearly doing a very good job. I mean, can you imagine riding for someone like having Sven Nys as your boss? Like, how did today go? Pretty well. Pretty well. I got 4th. I tried really hard, and he's probably never been 4th on that course before in his life. He's only ever won it.
Yeah, that's the difficulty with having management or sports director who's been that good. I always felt the same, in fact, when I had Sean Kelly as a manager of a team, or even Eric van der Arden as the sports director of a team. I'd imagine it would be immensely frustrating. I mean, they used to basically say, well, you do this, then you do this, and then you do this, and then you raise your hands aloft as the winner of the race. It's obviously not quite that simple unless you've got that level of talent. Anyway, back to the race in hand. They're on the second lap now here in Eeklo for the first round of what used to be the Cyclo-cross series, which is now the Ethias cross, Ethias being a national insurance company in Belgium.
So we've got Van Kessel leading from Hermans, and also Isabit in third, Arts in fourth, Stan Gaudry in fifth. So Van Kessel leading into the sand. He's going to just about, he's going to ride all the way there. So as has Tone Arts, Stan Gaudry is riding all the way, but kind of forcing his way through it, going a bit more slowly than the others, didn't carry his momentum, didn't skip across the top of the sand quite like the first two to ride it. And then that is definitely going to stretch this little group out a little bit. Not too much though.
Right, it's now 4 riders in front, so whoever it was that was with Tone Arts a few moments ago hasn't managed to join him in bridging across to our leading trio. We've got around 3 or 4 seconds between the first group and the next one that's just about to go over the brow of this bank. Probably be around about 11 laps, I would imagine, for the men here today to complete that 1 hour of racing.
Yeah, let's see. So Isabit just took the inside line off that climb and overtook Hermans there. Probably didn't want Hermans to leave a gap for his teammate. I know we spoke earlier about whether teamwork can play much of a part in cyclocross. I think this is one of the situations where it can. You can just see the Telenet, Baloise, Lions riders basically choosing to, I guess, essentially frustrate or annoy Isabit, just leaving a little gap go and never shutting it down unless they absolutely have to, which will leave Isabit a little bit out of breath. Lawrence Swake went through there in the middle of that larger group, but not kind of lived up to the favourite mantle foisted on him by Tone Arts just yet. Thomas Mine, for anyone watching from Britain, should be coming through shortly. Here he is. He's in Tom Mayerson's wheel back there, so number 50.
Well, doing very well then. Well done,
top
Thomas.
25.
Thank you for all your comments here on YouTube and also on Facebook too. Very much appreciate having your company for this first cyclocross in Europe this season. A couple of questions coming in lastly, which you will be better equipped to answer than me.
Let's go.
Hopefully. Firstly, from Joe Wakelin, how much wider will the handlebars be for the cyclocross riders here compared to what they would use out on their road bike?
I guess that most of them are probably using 44 centimetre wide bars, maybe 46s in some case. Maybe Sven Nace on screen right now is telling the Belgian viewers exactly that. I don't know. But yeah, so slightly wider than you would on road, just because it's off-road, it's a bit better for handling and a bit more comfortable, I guess. And also, I think there's probably a trend towards handlebars on road bikes getting a bit narrower.
Yeah, there is.
I remember when I raced, most people were using 42s, and now a lot of people will use 38s or 40s.
Yeah, that's right, from an aerodynamics perspective, which doesn't have quite as much of a bearing on the world of cyclocross, but still is a factor in it and something that needs to be considered. We had a question earlier on today about the riders in the women's race using aero helmets, and when you're going as fast as they are here, it will make a small difference, albeit not quite as much as if you're doing a time trial on the road. So I wonder if anyone in the world of cyclocross has got narrower handlebars than they're used to. If you're an expert out there, you can let us know in the comments and we shall read it out. But don't make it up. We don't need to look any more stupid than we already do.
Mikko Rajakangas has come in with a bit of a point that the reason that the lead group is not a group of 4 is because Michael Van Turenhout dropped his chain and couldn't stay on Arts' wheel when he made contact. Just so you know, Dan and Lasty, winky emoji.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mikko.
Well, any help that any of you can give us would be very much appreciated today, I have to say.
Certainly would, yeah. Make sure you comment and tell us what you think.
Just to let you know, you will be back in the very capable hands of Marty McDonald and the expert that is Jeremy Powers for most of the rest of the international races over the course of the rest of this year and the start of 2020. We're having to fill in for them at the moment because Marty is travelling around with the Tour of Britain commentating on that, and Jeremy is over in Vancouver in Canada doing some videos for us as we speak.
He's on holiday with Sai, isn't
he? Yeah,
by
basically.
the look of our Instagram page. It looks like they're doing great work over there. It looks like a fantastic trip, and the videos will be on our YouTube channel very soon. Yeah,
we're also hoping to have the company of Helen Wyman at points during the season, which is going to be fantastic as well. So plenty more cyclocross to come here on GCN over this winter season, which I, for one, am very much looking forward to.
Me too. I love cyclocross. I think what the viewers really want to understand, Dan, is when it's going to be you and I back on commentating on cyclocross.
Well, I mean,
I'm sure they'd love to look ahead with the other talent, but maybe that's not the question on top of their minds right now. I think the answer is maybe the 2020 to 2021 season.
Yeah, we'll be back this time next year.
Catch us this weekend
to do
next
our
year.
Traditional one
Season
race
opener
of the season. Oh, there we go. 10 laps to go. Nog 10 Runde, I think that is. So 10 laps to go in the men's race, so it's 12 in total for them today, which should be a little bit over an hour, but is a bit sailing through to the front of this group. Wanted to take command even though in that group there are 3 riders from the same rival team, the Telenet Baloise Lions squad, which, as Larcy pointed out, is headed up by none other than Sven Nace. Incidentally, if you didn't hear me talking earlier, his son Thibaut was the runner-up in the junior race a little bit earlier on today, and if I can find my notes I can tell you who won that.
Is a bit riding the sand. Van Kessel kind of balked his team leader Tonart slightly, but you can see Van Kessel running and just how much quicker it is. So what Van Kessel's doing is he's making a considered decision to run earlier, and then the riders who are trying to ride the sand are kind of struggling to ride the sandy bank at the end of it, so those who mess it up are forced to dismount badly, lose any momentum that they had, and therefore running quicker and making the decision is better. As you can see with Van Kessel there.
Interesting how few of the riders are using gloves last year. Is that something that has always been the case, or is it a more recent phenomenon?
No, I think it's pretty consistent in cyclocross. I remember, I think far fewer riders use, in road it's very unusual to see a rider at the front of the race without gloves, isn't it? I mean, Heinrich Hausler is one who comes to mind.
Well, there are more and more these days.
Never rides with gloves. I think in cyclocross, I don't know why. I think Bart Wellens didn't used to race without gloves, so maybe everyone thought it looked cool. In addition, if you crash on the road, of course you're going to skin your hands. If you crash on cyclocross, you might just put your hands in a load of mud, although not particularly wet mud today. Okay, big regrouping here, Dan.
Yeah, this is when it begins to get tactical, isn't it? We saw just a few moments ago as they came around that left-hand corner at the start of the finishing straight that they looked around, realised how big the group was, and there was a general slowing because nobody wanted to be on the front, putting out more power than the others on the slipstream behind, and that set up an attack. I think it was from Quinton Hermans in number 5. Yeah, he's on the front. He tried to get a gap, but the others were quick to follow. You can't really allow someone to get too much of a gap, especially on a race and course as tight and fast as it is today. But we've got lots of riders still in with a chance of winning today's race. There must be at least 12 or so, with barely a gap between them.
I think it's more. We got.
Belgian champion Tonarts hits the front for pretty much the first time in this race. He had a slightly slower start than some of the rest of the guys here today. He was around about 12th position at this point on the first lap of the race, but he's now pressing on the front, and as Larcy pointed out, at the end of a big week of training, he looks like he's out for another training ride today, determined to do as much work as possible.
Just putting the power down at the front.
This won't be a huge aim for every single rider here, will it? Tonarts is winner of the World Cup last year. His big aim will be to defend that overall crown in the World Cup and possibly the World Championships, I'm sure, as well. But it's always nice to start your season off with a win, isn't it? Yeah,
I think for a lot of these riders, the big aim is just going to be to have a hit out, clear out the lungs, and test your new equipment for the season as well. It's very early in the year. For many of them, their major goals will start to kind of really happen from November onwards, with the national championships, and then also the World Championships in January, and the bigger kind of some of the most prestigious races happening over the Christmas period. So anyone who's on their absolute top form now may struggle for the duration of the season. They might want to back off a bit and go on training camp, but I think, opening your season with a win, and also, like Tonarts did last year, taking that form into those first 2 World Cups kind of sets you up pretty well for the rest of the year.
Well, exactly. I mean, he won the World Cup last year, and that was a large part of that was thanks to his performances at the first 2 World Cups, which he won, which put him in quite a big lead coming into the European rounds. That said, he was also, of course, helped by the fact that Mathieu van der Poel didn't take part in those opening World Cups over in the USA last year. But it can pay off, contract-wise and points-wise, to be flying at this point in the season. It's not dissimilar to the road from that respect, is it? Years ago, the Tour Down Under was seen as a kind of training event, almost a party event, I think, for some of the riders out there who were still very relaxed in January and just looking to get some training miles in whilst they were relaxed. Now it's very important because it's a World Tour race, there are World Tour points on offer, and people go over there 6 weeks or so beforehand to prepare, to get acclimatised to the heat of Adelaide, and it's fiercely competitive. I also remember who won it the last couple of years, Darrell Impey, and he hasn't won that much since, but you can sign a new contract for winning the Tour Down Under for an Australian squad, so coming into the season hot doesn't necessarily need to be a bad thing.
No, certainly not. So Tonarts has dropped back through the group here, so you can see Gianni Vermeersch goes up the inside of him, and Tom Meyerson then goes up the inside of Gianni Vermeersch, pushes Vermeersch out. Vermeersch stays on. Toon Aerts can't quite see, but looks like he should have at least dropped his foot there. So way back through the group, Tom Meyerson, a highly skilled rider, taking a line that few others would really choose to take in that situation, using his skills to get towards the front of the race, and at the same time dropping Toon Aerts way back, although I'm sure it's not personal.
Well, it's Quentin Hermans who is now leading the charge here at the front, number 5 from the Telenet Baloise Lions team, choosing to get off midway through
Getting
the
off
sand
still
section
with
there.
momentum, so doing it better than Aerts in second place there, or that wasn't Aerts, was it? Doing it well there, and then remounting, so carrying all of his momentum through. You saw Van Turenhout definitely rode that very cleanly, number 2 there, but was too far back to really put that to his advantage in the race.
It is incredibly fast, this course, isn't it? A slight gap then for Hermans there at the front, but it looks like it is being closed by the Power Sozon Bingo squad. We've got 2 riders now in 2nd and 3rd place. So Telenet Fidea Lions, well, they've gone from being very dominant at the front, having 3 out of a group of 4, to having 1 rider at the front, and then quite a few places before we get to the 2nd rider from that team.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got a comment in from Micah Lemasters, which could be pretty insightful here, Dan. Do you think the payout will be entirely in stroke waffles? So maybe he's talking about the bad luck prize that they give.
Oh, so yes, if you missed that earlier as well, at each round of this Ethias Cross series, of which there are 8, all of which will be live incidentally here on GCN, the public get to vote on the Bad Luck of the Day award. So I'll be interested to see who gets that, or even if we see who is chosen for that at the end of our coverage today.
So the race is definitely starting to split up for those behind, isn't it? So they're going to be fighting to stay in the race, but at the same time really suffering to hold the wheel. Not a particularly pleasant situation to be in. So is that Meyerson up to 2nd now?
I think
3rd.
it is.
Yeah, so or 4th rather. So you've got Quinten Hermans, Dan Suter, Ili Isabit, and then Tom Meyerson a little off the back of them right now. Quentin Hermans is relatively easy to spot because he is the only Telenet Baloise Lions rider using red physique shoes. The rest of them seem to have been kitted out with yellow physique shoes. It's a nice dog. So yeah, that's how you can spot Quentin Hermans. I think Hermans was also winning during the road season, actually, wasn't he?
I don't remember actually.
I'm going to have to. I can't.
Have a quick look at pro cycling stats.
Yeah, it's not. I don't know off the top of my head.
Good to see Merson up there, though. We were talking about him before the race started. Has never quite lived up to the promise that he showed as a youngster in this world of cyclocross. He's riding for the Corendon Circus team in the white and red there at the back, which is of course the same team as Mathieu van der Poel. They race on the road as well as cyclocross, and in fact that is a team which is expanding, I think, quite significantly next year if the rumours are true. Canyon Bikes have signed a long-term contract with Van der Poel himself, and the rumours are that they'll be playing quite a lot more money into the Corendon Circus team too, so you could expect to see them maybe move up a level in the world of road racing next year, but that remains to be seen.
And then there's the other challenge there, which is Corendon has just been bought by Sunweb, has it not?
Oh, right.
So I think, or the parent, the kind of holding company, or the majority owner of Sunweb. So that company has 2 Benelux-focused holiday companies, each with 2 incredibly good cyclocross teams. So it'll be interesting to see if both of those remain. Quentin Hermans didn't just win once this road season, Dan. He won the prologue and the first 2 stages and the overall of the Flèche du Sud.
Oh well.
So strong rider, very strong rider.
Incredible, really, when you think that the majority of these riders use those road races as just preparation for the cyclocross season ahead. They generally take a break mid-February or so, or late February after the cyclocross season finishes. There are a couple of races normally after the World Championships take place. Then the cyclocross season is done. They can afford to go on holiday, take a couple of weeks off the bike completely, and then start building up with the longer miles on the road. And then you'll often see them, depending on what team they're competing for, riding over on the road as well, and with great success. I mean, we all know how well Mathieu van der Poel and Wout van Aert have been doing on the road this year. But it's not just them. Toon Aerts, if you didn't hear me earlier, he came 4th in the Baloise Belgian Tour at the beginning of June, or late May I think it was, behind some very, very good riders. Remco Evenepoel of De Koning Quickstep, Lotto Soudals, world hour record holder, whose name I've completely forgotten at the moment, was second overall in that race. Victor Campenaerts, that's the one. Thanks, Lasty. And then in third place was Tim Wellens. And just after that was this man, Tone Arts, fourth overall in that race. So again, it just goes to show the pedigree that even in a race with that level of competition and that level of World Tour riders, these guys can be well in the mix.
And I guess that some of those road riders you've mentioned would have been peaking for that race, wouldn't they? It may not have been their number one focus of the season, but it was definitely a second level goal for them during the year. And then you look at these cyclocross riders, and presumably they're kind of not peaking for that race, or not really aiming for it at all, except to get a good safe ride and prepare out of it. So again, you can see it is a bit trying to ride the sand. It looks like he's kept his momentum a little better, so he's riding the lump after it. Suter and Meyerson forced onto their feet there, so they're going to lose some time. Then Van Turenhout hit that rut so fast that he lost it. His kind of back wheel slid out. He had to use the whole thing as a berm, which was cool to see.
Tone Arts exactly the same. His back wheel came right out, but he managed to hold it up somehow.
Lars van der Haar, very strong rider in the sand, just riding it smoothly, not looking too stressed there.
He doesn't seem to have been quite the rider that he was a couple of years ago over the last 2 seasons, to me, Lars van der Haar.
I think that's probably fair from a results point of view, but you know, like we were discussing at the top of the coverage, Dan, with so many really good, talented young riders coming through who are younger than Van der Haar, maybe it's nothing to do with him.
Well, maybe not.
Because you're looking at 2-time World Under-23 champion. In second, you've got Hermans, a guy who's won a really challenging kind of road race that some of the best amateur and kind of semi-pro riders win. You've got Dan Suter, who rode from 70th to the top 30 in a mountain bike World Cup, the one that he's ever done. You know, you've got a field where the breadth of their talents is becoming more evident, and Van der Haar has always been a phenomenal cyclocross rider, but predominantly focused on cyclocross, and it might just be that he's not quite as fast as these guys anymore.
Yeah, it's always hard to tell whether you've got slightly worse or a rider's got slightly worse, or whether the level of the field has just gone up over the years. But Lars van der Haar, a man that promised so much, at least from my perspective a few years ago, hasn't quite managed to live up to that, and is a little way off the pace, you have to say, today. 2 riders who are slightly above the pace of everybody else at the moment are Elie Isbert in the red and black here at the front, and then just on his wheel, Quinten Hermans from Belgium. Both of them Belgium, in fact, which is not a huge surprise. Hermans himself, born in 1995, so this year he turns 24. So again, 2 youngsters ahead of affairs. Elie Isbert quite a bit younger than that, and still in the under-23 category this year, which it feels like he's been in forever.
Isbert born in 1997, when I guess you might have been in the under-23 category, Dan.
I think I might have just been junior still then.
Sorry.
In fact, I think I was still junior in 98.
Okay.
I was born in 1980. But yeah, if you're trying to make me feel old, you've succeeded.
Well, no, there are some riders here who are born after I'd been racing cyclocross for a couple of years, so it's pretty scary for me to look down the start sheet. Would you say there doesn't seem to be an ideal size for a cyclocross rider, does there? Isbert's quite short in stature there and looks pretty light as well. Tone Arts is at the other end of the spectrum, really. He looks to be well over 6 foot or 1.85 m. Quite gangly in comparison to Isbert here, but obviously both very good at the same discipline. Yeah, I don't know. I think if you look back a few years and you look at, Bart Wellens, Sven Nys, Mario de Klerk, all quite a similar height. So not the tallest riders, not the shortest, kind of not the biggest, strongest, but kind of not super skinny. I think particularly with the winter, cyclocross is something where I guess if you're on top form you want to be pretty light, but if you get too light you will get sick so easily once you hit November, December, January. So it just suits a range of pretty normal kind of cycling body types, I guess. Same as on the road, I guess. I think that's one of the things I like most about cycling is the fact that you can't look at someone's stature and decide whether they're going to be a good cyclist or not. You get tall, thin riders, you get tall, stockier riders, and vice versa, slightly shorter, stockier riders or thin riders. You can definitely look at someone's stature and decide how useful it will be to sit on their wheel, though. that is very true, yes. Thank you again for everyone who's joined us today for our coverage of this first European International Cyclocross race of the year in Eeklo. The first round of the Ethias
Cross. Lots of you getting involved in the comment section, but if you've got any questions for myself or for Tom last, this is pretty much the only cyclocross race we're commentating on this winter before we leave you in the capable hands of Marty McDonald and Jeremy Powers for the rest. So if you've got any specific questions for myself or Lasty, please feel free to leave them in the comment section, whether you're watching on Facebook or indeed on YouTube. We'd love to try and answer them for you before we get into the crunch point of this race. Round about halfway through this race now, 20 minutes raced since the start, since the gun was fired to set them off for this first race of the year. They've got 6 laps to go, so they're pretty much just coming up to the halfway point now.
Okay, it's been a fast race. I'd love to see the average speed on this. Do you know how long the course is?
No, I was trying to find that earlier. I've got a course map, but it doesn't say how long each lap is, but it does look very fast indeed. Not a surprise at the start of September. We've not had that much in the way of rain over the last few weeks in Northern Europe.
Yeah, certainly not. So here we go into the sand. Hermans makes a decision to dismount early, pushing his bike through the rut. You can see his back wheels flicking around there, but Meyerson is riding most of the sand, so he's closed that gap quite the way up. Van Turenhout is riding all of the sand incredibly strongly, so he's right back onto it. We could be seeing a group of 5. Oh, maybe not. Maybe not. There's a bit of a gap there. You might see a group of 2 and a group of 3 going through the start-finish again.
Van Turenhout's another tall rider, actually, isn't he? Looking at him.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he looks like he's strengthened up a bit over this summer. He's typically been quite a tall, gangly rider, but now he looks seriously strong as well.
If you want to have a look at how they started about making this course just a few weeks ago, you can check out the Instagram or Twitter feed of the Ethias Cross. That's ETHIAS CROSS. Interesting to see just how much sand they have to bring in to make these small obstacles for the riders. The barrier is almost slightly easier than making the sandy sections, but that's what cyclocross is all about. You get different types of courses which suit different types of riders, unless your name is Van der Poel or Van Aert, in which case most of them seem to suit you 99%
in which case
of
the
the
fact
time.
that it's a bike race is enough.
Yeah,
it's got a start line, it's got a finish line.
Yeah, if you're on 2 wheels,
that's your type of thing.
If you're on 2 wheels and you have to turn the pedals round, it's probably a race for one of those two. So it's starting to get a bit more spread out now, and again the dominance of the Telenet Baloise Lions squad not quite where it was in the opening few laps of this race. They've now got a group of 5 here at the front, and only one of them is from that squad. In fact, I think it looks like we've got 3 from the Power Sozan Bingo team.
Oh, interesting kind of move. Early display of strength from Telenet Baloise Lions before Power Sozan comes through. Tom Meyerson, interestingly, is using a bottle on his seat tube, whereas Dan Suter is the only other rider in the lead group also carrying a water bottle, and he has a water bottle on his down tube. So
he's just thrown it off.
So he had a water bottle on his down tube.
Is he allowed to pick up another one on the side?
He's not allowed to pick up another one unless there's dispensation from the commissaires, which I don't know either way about, I'm afraid. So yeah, on a kind of hottish day, it's probably quite nice to have a bit of water if you get dry mouth on a course like this. There's no kind of seriously protracted or long running. They've not got the bikes on the back at any point in this course, so having a bottle on doesn't kind of get in the way of that, and pretty minimal extra weight, particularly on a flat course like this.
Yeah, it's not something we see much of in the world of cyclocross, but of course in general, should I say, it takes place in the winter months when it's a lot cooler and you don't need the liquid quite as much. But today, as you can see on the side of the course, lots of fans spectating in t-shirts and short sleeves, so it must be reasonably warm out there today. There are a few people with coats on there on the side, but warm enough for a couple of the riders to decide to use bottles today. Not all of them, but I don't think we saw any in the women's race earlier on, but that's a slightly shorter race, 40 minutes versus 1 hour for the men's. Although I think there has been a call to make the women's race 1 hour as well, hasn't there?
Yeah, why not? I think it was really, I think most of the many, if not most, of the best cyclocross races I had the pleasure of watching on GCN with Marty as commentator last year were the women's cyclocross racing. The field has phenomenal depth, and it's really very hard to predict a winner, and it produces really close racing. In contrast to the men's race, where last year at least we knew the top 2 by looking at the start list more often than not.
Well, we knew the top 1. I think Van der Poel won pretty much 95% of the races he started in cyclocross last year. In fact, there was an incredible stat after stage 1 of the Arctic Race of Norway, which he won, which said that he'd He'd won more than 70%, I think, of all the races that he started in 2019. So 100% of the cyclocross races from the 1st of January this year he won. Most of them in mountain biking he won, and something in the region of 50% of the road races. A bit slightly less than that, but still a phenomenal strike rate in road races this year at that point too. It really is quite phenomenal. Good or bad for the sport that those two aren't racing as much this winter?
I think it's unfortunately it might be bad for some of the ticket takings for the Belgian events. That's one of the ways I guess that they keep going, not just through sponsorship. So hopefully not too many of the medium to smaller size events, or even the bigger events that those two riders would ordinarily attend, will take a hit there. But I think kind of for the racing, indifferent perhaps. If you're enough of an enthusiast, you'll know a few more names than Van der Poel and Van Aert. Maybe this is a chance this season to get to know them a bit better. And I think at the moment cyclocross is somewhere that the most talented riders tend to graduate from to road racing. It's just how it is, isn't it? It's not a bad or a good thing, it's just how it works.
Well, you do wonder, given the success of some of these cyclocross riders on the road, how many more of them will be tempted over. I know Tone Arts has publicly said that cyclocross is the one for him, and he doesn't really have a huge interest in trying to make it as a full-time road rider. But at the end of the day, there's a fair bit more money in road than there is in cyclocross if you're at the top of your game. Likes of Peter Sagan, the top of his game, the top of the world when it comes to earnings really. It's on about €5 million per year. But Mathieu van der Poel, I'm sure, will not be a long way behind that on his new contract, because he sells bikes, doesn't he? That's why Canyon have signed a long-term contract with him, because not only does he sell road bikes, he sells cross bikes and he sells mountain bikes as well. So it doesn't get much better for a bike manufacturer like Canyon.
Just a fantastic rider to watch, isn't he? Often when people are so dominant, it's easy to think that they may always win the easy way, but Van der Poel often wins the incredibly hard way. And I think he's a fantastically engaging rider to watch racing. I think for a rider like Tone Arts as well, it might be that he's going to earn more money in cyclocross. He's Belgian national champion. He'll be getting good start money. He wins enough prize money through the year, so he probably has an income that he doesn't feel he could match as a road rider. So Elliott is a bit on the attack, but being quite quickly shut down by Quinten Hermans there, although it has had the effect of distancing slightly down Suter and perhaps slightly more Tom Meyerson, who's just out of shot. I meant to ask Dan, we were talking about road riders, cross riders making the jump to road. So Tim Merlier, Belgian champion, some big wins. Give up cross, go to road? Belgian road race champion, not on a Belgian World Tour team, seems pretty unusual.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because cyclocross is a huge sport in Belgium, and it's a sport that these riders have been doing for many, many years. And because it's so big in Belgium, they can afford to specialise in it. It's not something where they had to supplement it necessarily from a financial point of view with the road. They just do that from a training perspective to get themselves ready for cyclocross. However, if you do start having success on the road like Tim Merlier's had, there must be a thought process in your head going on of the pros and cons of each one, because a professional athlete has a very short career, even in a sport like cycling where you can continue in general into your mid-30s. It still means that 30 years before proper retirement age you need to start again, so you want to maximise your earnings from your career. So it will be quite a big decision for them, and we won for Merlier. Anyway, here is the pit. We won't be seeing much of the riders going into them this race because of the conditions here being so dry. There's really no need to change your bike whatsoever unless you have some kind of technical problem, which leads me on to a question that came in from Bob Ferguson. As an amateur or beginner, would I need two bikes for cyclocross?
No, I think is the answer, Bob. I think that you may quickly want two bikes for cyclocross depending on your local conditions. So if you're racing in the UK or the Pacific Northwest or somewhere like that, you're going to get pretty muddy pretty quickly this year. So that will mean that you would prefer to have an extra bike, but it's by no means absolutely necessary for most races. One thing is, if you've got a spare bike, you kind of need a friend or partner to be there in the pits helping you out. So you're not just buying two bikes, you're also dragging someone else along to the race as well. But I think two bikes if you can, for sure, but try it with one bike, see how you get on. If you like it, get two bikes.
I think it's fair to say that at the very top end of the sport, once we get into the late autumn and winter season, it's pretty much impossible to compete if you've only got one bike, one set of wheels and one set of tyres for the cyclocross season, because it has become so very specialist, particularly with the wheels and tyres in fact. And if you look into the truck, as last year has done many times with some of these top teams, the number of wheels that they've got with different cassette ratios, different types of tyres for different courses really is quite phenomenal. So it's a big investment, but certainly, as Lassie said, for an amateur or somebody just starting out in cyclocross, there's no reason in a lot of races actually to even have to have a cyclocross bike. I've taken my younger son to quite a few cross races which he's competed on a mountain bike. Not all organisers will let you compete on a mountain bike, so you need to check beforehand, but you shouldn't let the lack of equipment put you off getting going, because it's a fun sport, it's a hard old sport, and it always tricks you into being more fun than it is, in my opinion, when you start racing in September, because it's nice and warm. Once you get into December, it's great when you're racing for an hour. That bit where you have to get a cold bucket of water and clean yourself off afterwards, I used to hate.
Yeah, that's it's a necessary rather than a fun part of it, isn't it? As you were saying about tyres, Dan, I think the other thing is that these riders kind of collect them over the course of their career as well. So if there's a specific tyre made by one of the manufacturers for a team they were with at the time or for a course, they'll keep those because they might just come in useful one race. So, you had, I think Niels Albert won a World Cup or maybe even a World Championship on a pair of Tufo tubulars, which normally he'd never use. He'd use Dugas, which happened to be just the perfect tread for the day. You had Wout van Aert used a pair of green Michelin Mud tubular treads mounted on Dugas tubular tyres to win the World Championships when they were in Luxembourg. And those green tyres, I think they're being made again this year, but hadn't really been made since the 90s. So someone in his crew had sourced a pretty rare pair of tyres that have been useful on one day in 2 or 3 years, but have proven pretty damn useful when he has done that.
It's an interesting one, that, actually, because there is a UCI rule that states that any equipment that a pro rider is using needs to be made available to the public within a certain amount of time. I think it's 3 or 4 months after that rider is using it in professional racing. But if they're sourcing, I don't know how that works, if they're sourcing
I think
vintage tyres.
I think that Dugas will put your treads on those tyres if you ask. They have been sold to the public. I owned a pair many, many years ago, but sold them for pocket change really, because I didn't think they were worth anything at the time. And I think, who's to say that Wout van Aert's dad didn't buy them as a legit consumer 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Still got the treads knocking around.
4 laps remaining then. Lars van der Haar going over the finish line in around about 12th place, and we've got once again an 8-rider group at the front. 2/3 of the way into this race now. Toon Aerts, number 1 there, the Belgian champion, back to the front. He's had a bit of a yo-yo race so far, hasn't he? He was not near the back, but he's around about 12th place on the first lap. He quickly made his way to the front. Then he got distanced again and was gapped to the first group to where he was, but he's now back on the front. And this is a race which we expected to be dominated by 2 teams, and that is what is the case now. Telenet Baloise Lions. Toon Aerts in the national champions jersey, but the rest of them in the black and yellow. The other big team here, the Power Sozan Bingo squad, in the dark red and black. They've got at least 3, possibly 4 riders in this lead group, and the other one is Tom Meersen, who's just making his way up the left-hand side of the screen, right-hand side of the course. Wow.
So just carries a bit of momentum, grabs hold of the course, gains 3 places. Smooth.
Which is completely allowed, isn't it? Holding onto those barriers or fences at the side is something we see quite often.
Yeah, I think so. I think that they've kind of trying to tape or at least put posts in on the course in such a way that it's not advantageous to do it. There definitely used to be some courses where on U-bends you could grab hold of the post and kind of sling yourself around it, but not the case, or decreasingly the case perhaps. Toon Aerts back to the front. He's had a solid training ride there, Dan. Kind of got some medium tempo stuff in the middle of his race now.
Well,
kicking it back
I
up
was
again.
just about to say actually that if you have had a tough week of training, perhaps quite a large volume, or at least a lot of intensity, it can take the sprightliness out of your legs, can't it? In terms of those very, very sharp accelerations, you haven't quite got that real top end power that you do when you're fresh, and that's why for something like a hill climb, for example, of 2 minutes or so, it's always best to be really fresh so that you can get those last bits of power out. So that might be, but that might mean that he comes to the good in the latter part of this race, which is where he's at now. We've got 20 minutes or so of racing to go. He's at the front of the race, and he's looking pretty good.
Yeah, it's just kind of coming to the front. Really strong rider. Putting the watts out.
I'd like Tom Mason to win.
I would as well.
Next to all these other riders from rival teams.
Friend of the channel. Got a couple of videos on the channel from way back. Probably 2015. Yeah, winter 2015, which are definitely worth checking out. Really skilled rider and really nice guy to boot. Jeremy does have some trips to Belgium planned for this winter,
yes,
doesn't he? So
yeah.
If there is anything that you would like to see from the cyclocross season, any riders that you want Jeremy to catch up with or any skills to focus on, do tell us in the comments or get in touch on really any social media platform. We all check the comments and messages. You'll get a reply very often from Dan or Sai, or I check them too. And tell us what you want to see on the channel, because we really value your feedback, and we do. Some of our best ideas have come from our viewers, I think.
Probably all of them, if we're completely honest. But yeah, please get involved.
Keep the comments coming. Say hi. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you think we can do to improve, or if there's a video you want to see. We thrive on your feedback. We'd love to hear it. So here's a bit back to the front. He's an explosive rider today. He's kind of putting the hammer down, isn't he?
He is. Will today be the day he takes his first big senior cyclocross race? Could well be, given how he's been looking, but there's a lot still to play for. We had a very close race with the women earlier on. If you don't want to hear the results of that, then tune out right now. But in the end, it was Mode Captains who took the win this morning from that same Power Sozan Bingo squad. Must have a lot of riders in total, in fact. She had been distanced earlier on in the race, but came back to a small group and went on to take the win.
As cleanly has all race. And if you're tuning back in after Dan read out the results of the women's race because you didn't want to get the spoilers, this race will be able to view on demand on GCN Racing on YouTube, so that's youtube.com/GCN Racing, and also on Facebook, so facebook.com/GCN Racing, if you'd like to watch the race or maybe listen to the commentary again, Dan.
Wow, look at the gap that Isbert's got now over Tone Arts in second place. That's the biggest gap we've seen for, pretty much the whole of this race, I would say.
He's almost out of sight on there.
Wow, a big turn of speed then from the young Belgian rider, who, will remind you, is still eligible for the under-23 category. This is a race which has the elites and the under-23s all racing together in both the men's and the women's events, and it looks at the moment like Isabet is on course to win both of them. Clear daylight between himself now and the next riders behind. If he takes a look over his shoulder, he's going to see that, and he will be fully committed. 3 laps to go for the young Belgian Isabet as we embark on the first cyclocross of the European season here in Eeklo. Big group behind, not over for them completely yet, but that's going to be a tough gap to
you can
reduce.
see how smoothly he's riding the sand here, so he gets the rut just right, keeps his momentum. He's still able to put a lot of power out there and carry it up the hill where Tone Arts is forced onto his feet. Isabet, Dan, I think actually isn't an under-23. I think it's an error with our start list, because there are some junior riders who will have been racing junior on the road last week.
I
could race junior on the road next week, I guess, but are under 23 because the cyclocross season finishes in 2020. So your age at the end of 2020 is taken, and that's what informs your category.
Well, that makes sense, because as we said earlier, it does feel like he's been an under-23 rider forever, doesn't it? 4 years you're in the under-23s, 2 years as a junior before that, and Isabet, as Larsie pointing out.
Huge gap now.
It is, yeah.
Got a full straight.
Well, that's got to be at least 10 seconds. In fact, I'm going to get my clock up and running.
Okay.
For the next time we get through to a corner where we can see both groups, I can tell you exactly what the gap is.
I'm not sure there's any section where you can see both groups anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, if that's a sign of things to come, the rest of these riders have got something to worry about for this season. Right, I finally found my clock app.
Okay.
And stopwatch app, so I shall start it once we see Isabet again, and hopefully we'll see the next riders coming through the same part. Take that corner there, but it's certainly at least 10 seconds, and it opened up incredibly quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, and it was the difference was made on something that it requires power, but it's definitely a skill section. There's probably an art and a skill to riding sandy sections. The best way to get it is certainly practice. You find very few naturally very good sand riders. Just riders who consistently race in sandy conditions tend to be very good at them.
Well, it really hammers home how important cyclocross can be to your bike handling, because when you watch them go through those sand, they're all over the bike trying to balance, aren't they? It doesn't look particularly pretty sometimes, but it's effective.
Yeah, it looks quite the opposite, in fact. It doesn't look. It looks pretty inefficient and not all that nice. Tone Arts is winding it up again.
Well, I've timed it from over the barriers, and it is currently 8 seconds, the gap between Isabet and this group, being led by Tone Arts 8 seconds behind him. But he is fully committed now, Lasty, isn't he? Inside the last 3 laps of this race. He hasn't looked around particularly much, but you don't need to on a course like this necessarily, because there are so many U-turns and places where you go back on yourself. You're able to see what your gap is without turning round.
Yeah, and really the section of the course he's just faced is the more open section of the course. That's where he's at more of a disadvantage than he is on this section. And this section, the more technical second half of the course, of course, made the difference. He just had his inside foot out around that corner, so he's got to clip back in pretty quickly. Not sure I've seen any other riders doing that. I know there's this guy second in the group there did. Just helps you to hit the rut. Now that you can see the rut is actually pretty well established. Given those,
you use those ruts almost like berms, don't you? When you're racing cyclocross, there through the sand or through the mud, you'll often get these ruts, and you need to be very well balanced on the bike to be able to take them. But you can on a corner go through a lot quicker sometimes. You get it right, almost like you're on rails, really.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what you're looking to do. So Isabit now, the gap is kind of closing up from Tonarts, but so long as he hits the sand section first again and has a clean run through, chances are he might stretch his gap out again.
Well, it's one of those things, isn't it? Once you get a bit of clean air and you're on your own, there's only one thing to do, and that is to commit fully. You're always, even in the world of cyclocross, if you're with another load of other riders in a group, there's always that bit in the back of your head thinking that you need to be a little bit coy, not to use too much of your energy, not to do too much on the front, as Tonarts gets it slightly wrong going into the sandy section
right,
there.
So that's going to help us a bit out again.
I should get my clock running in a minute. Thanks to Guido de Vries.
Really unfair comment from Guido de Vries, isn't it?
I was just about to read it out. I found my clock app, in inverted commas. Dan just continues to sound old. To which Bob Ferguson replied, Dan's 39, nearly 40. So yeah, I'm getting there. It's sounding increasingly old.
I thought you were 29. Bob's added 10 years.
I'm 40, going on 2. Right. Stopwatch has been started again on Isabit as he goes over that banking, but I'm not sure we're going to see the other riders on that particular point on the course. But looks like it's remaining. Oh, I say that. It looks like it's remaining steady.
Teammate,
wow.
So that's Van Toren out.
Yeah. Well, they came across incredibly quickly, didn't they?
Well, I think Tonarts got the gap to around 4 to 5 seconds. Then Tonarts messed up the sandpit for the second consecutive lap, meaning that Van Toren out, who's second in the group, didn't get tied up by Tonarts in the sandpit, came round and has now joined his teammate, which will definitely help out Isabit, particularly because it will be on the Telenet Baloise Lions to coordinate the chase from behind, because they have 2 teammates in that group as well.
Well, yeah,
you can see that Jürgen Metterpinger, the team boss for Paul Sazen, getting into it, giving his riders some encouragement there.
It'll be quite a day in the pits for them today, won't it? But it won't be the case, of course, through the rest of the cross season.
It's the sort of race where, unless you have a puncher as you're about to enter the pit and you change bike, any mechanical is just kind of the end of it, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's far too fast a course to really be able to make any positions up if you lose a minute or 2.
Yeah. If you puncher here, it's probably race over.
Well, Ridley will be pleased, won't they? They're the sponsor of this Power Sozen Bingo squad. 1 and 2 here in the race at the moment.
And they used to be the sponsor of nearly every Belgian cyclocross team, so they've lost a little of their dominance because they no longer have 30 or so riders on them, but still maintain quite a degree just with the strength of the riders who are sponsored by Ridley.
Telenet, of course, riding Trek Bone bikes. In fact, they've got a great colour scheme this year. I was looking earlier before we came to commentate on the Elite Women's event earlier on this morning. Very nice looking bikes, I have to say. Canyon will be represented in this front group with Tom Merson. That team, the Corendon Circus squad, of course, riding Canyon bikes, which we see Mathieu van der Poel on the road and in mountain biking too. The perfect rider to sponsor for them, in my opinion. Although it can't have come cheap. I
imagine that nearly every bike brand will be looking around thinking he is the perfect rider for us to sponsor.
Well, it just makes sense, doesn't it? When you know, I get from a certain degree, you could say Peter Sagan's the same, couldn't you? Because although he doesn't compete that much in mountain biking, he did try and do the Olympics a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, I guess now.
Had a very good start, then a mechanical, didn't he? He was in the top 5 for a little while there.
But he's still out videoing on his mountain bike quite often, isn't he? And then on the female side of things, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, another rider who does 3 disciplines, and it just makes a big difference.
Yolanda Neff is the same, although slightly lower profile in the other 2 disciplines.
Even Anna van der Breggen, actually.
Yeah.
Won the Cape Epic this year with her partner, Langvad.
Which is pretty extraordinary, really. So yeah, are we living in a new age of the multidisciplinary rider?
Well, it's a strange one, isn't it? Because
I couldn't even be master of one. I don't know about you. So seeing these people who can master at least 3 things is scary.
The reason I say it's strange is because it felt like we were steadily heading towards more and more specialisation, even within the same disciplines. On the road, for example, people that do the Grand Tours well, you rarely see them up there in the one-day races, etc. But just the last couple of years, we've seen riders who are racing all the way through the winter and then all the way through the summer with great success in different disciplines. It's great to see. I just didn't think I would see it.
No, I thought you exactly right. I thought we'd go the other way and we'd have people who were steep hill specialists rather than just climbing specialists.
Well, 55 minutes into the race, we have 2 riders out front. Michael van Turenhout is the 25-year-old from the Power Sozan Bingo squad. His teammate up there with him, an under-23 champion twice, Ellie Isabeth, also riding for that very same team. But they've now been caught by the Belgian champion Toon Aerts, and in fact by the rest of the group that Aerts was in. So 5 riders at least still in with a chance of winning this race. Lap and a half still remaining, and the speed, if anything, is getting higher and higher.
It's been a long race for Ellie Isabeth as well. That sounds daft because, of course, the race is the same amount of time for, well, not the same amount of time, but is the winner, the time's taken on the winner. But it's the same distance for everyone. But Ellie Isabeth has spent a lot of time out front with his nose in the wind, hasn't he?
He has, yes. He's been very determined today. He seems full of confidence, doesn't he? Hopefully that confidence won't take a knock if he doesn't win.
Yeah, maybe like Toon Aerts, he's just out for a training ride. He's decided to go about getting the toughest training ride he possibly can.
I've had a question in from somebody called Guy Voisin. Will you be broadcasting the Super Prestige? Yes, Guy, is the answer to that. We not only have the Ethias Cross here, of which there are 8 rounds, we also have the Super Prestige, and we also have the DVV Cyclo-cross, and stay tuned for potential news about some short clips from the UCI World Cups too. So we've got a pretty much full season of Cyclo-cross ahead of you here on GCN Racing, and for the majority of it you will be in the company of Marty McDonald and Jeremy Powers, who for the most part will be commentating remotely. Back to the race in hand though, and Toon Aerts has put in a monstrous attack there, coming across the line with 1 lap to go. They'll be hearing the bell now, so it means they've got in the region of 5 minutes of racing remaining. So this is crunch point basically in this first round of the Ethias Cross. Only rider able to go with him is Ellie Isabeth, who's been the other most active rider, I would say, of the men's race so far today. So 2 riders in front. Is anybody else going to be able to bridge back across to them?
Yes, at this rate. Looks like Van Turenhout is closing the gap pretty well there. Like you were saying in answer to Guy's question there, Dan, we have pretty much the full Cyclo-cross connoisseurs season available for most of you to watch right here on GCN Racing on YouTube, and also on Facebook. We'll be on both platforms. We've got all of the biggest Belgian races, so all of the classic courses, races like this in Eeklo, but also races like the Koppenberg Cross, and many of the best races from the Christmas period of racing too. So please do subscribe if it's the sort of stuff that you want to see, and tell us what you think. Tell us what we could change, what we could do differently to help you to enjoy the Cyclo-cross season with GCN more.
Yeah, and if you could help us in any way with sharing this content out, that would be very much appreciated too, because the more people we get viewing this content, the more likely we are to be able to continue doing it into the future, which I for one would absolutely love to be able to do for all of you, and to hopefully more territories in the future as well, fingers crossed. But in the meantime, back to the race in hand today. Still the same 2 riders at the front, but it did have a bit of a coming together once again. 6 riders really still in with a shout, maybe even 7 actually, looking at that picture now, in with a shout of winning the race, but the speed will be absolutely flat out at the moment. Who do you think would be most confident if it came down to a sprint out of these riders, Lasty?
I have no idea, Dan. Is Quinten Hermans there? Because he's won a couple of road races, hasn't he?
No, he's not. He's
he not
been
number 5?
distanced, number 5.
Yeah, that's Quinton Hermans, yeah, number 5.
Oh, I didn't see a number 5 there.
Yeah, that's him. I see him in 4th place. In the
Oh,
group.
yes, okay, sorry.
Tone Arts going on the attack again.
Whoa.
Bigger rider trying to bully Ellie Isabet a bit there. Look for Isabet to nip up the inside of a corner on Tone Arts in revenge for that squeeze, I would suggest.
It must just be burning so much in the legs right now for all of these riders. Heart rate absolutely sky high. He was freewheeling ever so slightly then.
Well, I think he was just putting it into a much harder gear to try and inflict more pain on everyone with him. Dan Sota in 3rd place looks like he's just barely holding on there. He looks like he's in a lot of pain.
Well, they make it look very easy, don't they? But make no mistake, they'll all be close to their limits right now, and if they weren't, they would be now trying to make the difference. As Isabet now comes to the front again, and Suter also comes through.
Good move from the team there. They're going into this section, so if Sota put his foot down and slowed the others down, he would do a big favour for Isabet. Oh, he has kind of slowed down quite significantly there, giving Isabet 2 seconds out of it.
Oh my word, that almost seemed a little bit unfair, I have to say.
That was a little bit of, should we call it teamwork or gamesmanship?
Wow.
What's the correct?
I don't know if I really agree with that. Anyway,
it was a bit naughty,
has been
wasn't it?
Forced back onto the front of that group, and he's got his teammate Hermans coming up there as well. So it's now on the Telenet Balois Lions' shoulders to try and make the difference and claw their way back up to Isabet, who's now got, 3-4 seconds advantage, simply down to his teammate Surter, slowing things down on the banking there.
It's really interesting. You know, Surter's been a nearly flawless technical rider the whole race, and his skills just seemed to desert him on that one corner, didn't they?
Yeah, weird that.
Funny that, and now Isabet has a small gap. However, Lawrence Sweek, who Tone Arts said was favourite, isn't very happy that his teammate's out front, so has decided to close it down for the Telenet Balois Lions. Not very clearly, he is on your side in the Dan Suter debate there, Dan, and said that's not right, Dan.
No,
we should help them out in return for that.
There's no rules against it, are there? But I just didn't think it was very good.
Isabet has messed the sand up, so Swake is coming through.
Whoa! Look at that.
No,
he lost a bit of momentum towards the end, but he made up a good couple of seconds on his teammate just then, didn't he?
Yeah.
Herman's 3rd at the moment, and then Tone Arts is in 4th place. Wow, look at the speed of Swake as he comes through number 4.
We've not seen him at the front of the race until now, and now he's just smashing it. Although Isabet definitely carried more speed down that descent, so he's going to try and close it on this climb, but Swake is super strong.
I think he might have the strength to take this last. That was incredible through that sand. I mean, he was holding a lot in reserve for the rest of this race, powering up the banks as well. Isabet doing his best to get back on terms. Of the two of them,
not happening.
You don't think he's going to get back on terms? He's absolutely he's flat out. He's on his limit now, isn't he? Both technically and physically.
I don't think his tyres were on their physical limit.
Wow.
There we go. Well, Lawrence
Sweek,
who we didn't talk about all race, who we didn't see,
takes the win, yeah.
Smashed the last third of the last lap.
Brilliant way to win the race as well. Lawrence Sweek taking it from his teammate Isabet, who has to settle for 2nd place. Quinton Hermans there coming across the line in 3rd.
Comes through and outsprints Tone Arts just to add insult to injury after that.
Might be a photo finish between those two. What a brilliant day's racing, both on the men's side and the women's side, lastly. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I was not expecting Swake to be able to go quite that hard in the last 2 minutes of the race.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a fantastic day of racing to watch. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. We hope you all have too. And remember, please be sure to subscribe. Please set your notifications. Share our videos, because we have pretty much the full cyclocross season coming right up for you.
We do, yes. So your
exciting times for us, and we hope for you.
Your help and support will be very much appreciated. Also, if you're still with us, stay tuned for highlights of the Vuelta a España, which goes back into the mountains today for stage 15, I believe it is, as we watch Gianni Vermeersch coming through in around about 10th place. We saw him have that slight problem as he got balked by another rider earlier on in this race, so he'll be slightly disappointed at that. Lars van der Haar, number 3, coming in just behind him, but there's a happy man. Lawrence Sweek was given the billing by Tone Arts of being the favourite for today's course because he said it suited him so much, and he was right.
Yeah, I mean, but Sweek played it tactically perfectly, didn't he? Really? I mean, I think he got lucky with Isabet's bobble in the sand. Isabet had ridden that section cleanly more often than not, but yeah, fair play. Good tactical race.
Well, the speed he carried through that sand was quite remarkable, this man, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Even though he slowed ever so slightly towards the end and was about the same speed as Isabet, who was running by that point. There was an incredible amount of power. In fact, I'd like to see the power file from the last 2 minutes of his race, because he was sprinting flat out everywhere he possibly could.
I wouldn't like to see it, actually. Scary.
Right. Thank you all for joining us for today's coverage. It
Certainly.
might be early September, but the cyclocross season is now well upon us. And we'll continue full throttle over the next, 4 months really, maybe even 5 months I think the cross season is these days.
So here we go. This is a rerun of the last lap. So Isabit off his bike super early. Swake's accelerating into the sand. I think this is slightly... Was that sped up, that coverage? It looks sped up. Isabit missed the opportunity to put his teammate into the barriers a little bit there. And so Swake won. Made it look pretty easy.
Well, I was going to say, it looked simple there at the finish in the end, didn't it? After what we thought would be an incredibly close battle, he was so powerful at the end compared to everybody else. No one was able to match him.
So Fritz with ketchup or curry ketchup or mayo from his team sponsor as a reward for Lauren Swake tonight. Who do you think won the Bad Luck Award? Okay.
Oh, very good question, Larcy. If you're wondering what that is, each of the 8 rounds of the Ethias Cross, the public get to vote for the Bad Luck of the Day award. We haven't found out exactly who that is. Might check social media at the end of this to see who got it for today. Don't even know what the prize is. I just like the fact that they've got a Bad Luck of the Day award.
It's voted for by the fans, isn't it? So maybe they'll put it out to social media vote.
Yes. Well, thank you for joining me, Larcy, and thank you all at home for joining us for today's coverage. Again, a reminder, we've got highlights of La Vuelta coming for you very shortly on GCN Racing. Within an hour, hopefully, of that particular stage finishing. Same thing goes for the Tour of Britain, which will be going out to most territories. So again, a reminder also to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Click on the bell icon, and that will mean you are informed every time we upload a video or go live, and we'll be having plenty of that over the next few months. Bid you a fond farewell. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.